A night in with Mauler and the drinker, getting trashed with the web screen dinkers. A cheap night cause I'm feeling kinda thrifty, got a 10-pack of beers and a bottle of whiskey. Hop up the cork, have a glass of wine, plus they'll say I'll be fine. Trouble walking in a straight line, but pour me a Pinot Noir. It's open bar with our hosts, Mauler and the critical drinker.
Hello, it's us. We're here.
Hey.
Look at us. We're here for another open bar, and well, this is an interesting one because one, I didn't quite know what to make it the focus of this open bar. Like, there's not any big like releases right now, and two, I have to make a confession. I kind of waited until the last minute to organize guests. Put out a whole bunch of invites thinking that only maybe one or two people would be able to make it. And then they all came. So we've got a packed lineup tonight.
Like stumble into the bar like, everybody come on.
Yes. Open bar, dude. So yeah, I don't know. Should we start bringing people in so we can get this thing moving? What do you think?
I reckon so, yeah.
All right. Well, first up first, we have got DJ Cobra from Geeks and Gamers. I recognize you, sir.
Please be a
What's
god.
going on? I know you guys. You guys were asking, and I didn't give a definitive answer, which I apologize for. But I'm here. I'm always honored to be on with you guys. And I don't know what's going on in the world other than Frosk went after Henry Cavill, so I'm sure we can talk about that.
Oh, we'll talk about that. Don't worry. Yeah, it's good to catch you again, man. I know you're busy like schmoozing with the fans out there in Orlando. You know, it's the tough life of a big time YouTuber.
It's been such a tough life for me lately, just being surrounded by people telling me how great I am, even though it's not true. I will continue to let them believe that, I guess. But it's been humbling to be here in Orlando and meet with all the fans. And a lot of them wanted to see you guys. So maybe next year. Maybe next year.
Make it happen, man.
Let's do it.
But it's okay. You've always got Ryan to take the piss out of you. Speaking of which, there we go.
Exactly. That is the perfect recipe for Jeremy having too many people around him that say how cool he is and how great he is. I'm here to bring that shit back down, all right? And for you guys on this show, if you need something to talk about between releases, if you're looking for somebody to like squeeze a rock until something comes out content related, I think you got us here. So we can find something to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Oh, don't worry. There's plenty of dramas we can cover, so that's all good, man. And this is your first time actually in open bar, so welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me. So I've been invited a couple times, a link here and there, but it just never works out. But now we're here. I'm literally right on the other side of the wall from Jeremy in this content house. So, right there. So
get a few beers in you, and I dare you to punch through that wall. I reckon you can do it. It's just drywall.
I don't need a beer, just super chats, I think. So
For legal purposes, open bar does not engage with violence at any point.
Even against innocent walls. We have also got the little platoon making, I think, your third appearance on this show, so welcome again.
It's more the kind of thing you just can't keep me away from an open bar. So thank you for having me back.
Yeah,
He's speechless.
It's all in your icon, you know.
Yeah, although on the whiskey today rather than the wine, because I was about to say diet, but I'm not actually sure that makes any sense. But I'm going to use that as my excuse anyway. I'm on a diet, so whiskey rather than wine.
That's fair enough. Yeah, it's probably got less calories because it's more efficient, you know.
Yeah, that means you can have like twice as much, which is that's the rule. But no, thank you very much for having me back.
No, it's a pleasure, man. And well, I know that you're busy working on the thing that I shall not name because you're sick of talking about it. So this is a nice little diversion. We can just talk about meaningless nonsense, which has been going on Twitter.
It's a lovely diversion. There's another lovely diversion as well, which is that having finally sort of got over the bulk of Rings of Power, I've been catching up on the last pretty much 2 months worth of TV, as though, because I'm only just now catching up on House of the Dragon for the first time, so I get to enjoy all of this stuff that everyone else has already enjoyed all over again. So that's been a nice thing, deferred gratification.
That's one way to guarantee a show will be good. Just watch it after you watch Rings of Power. Anything will be good at that point.
See, we spread it all out, so we're kind of catching it week on week. It's like you get a good moment with House of the Dragon, then you have to watch She-Hulk. So that's the cosmic balance, you know.
How are these two productions made by the same species? I'm not sure.
It's baffling. And yeah, we'll bring in our last guest, which is Cultivated Media, going by your new name now. And yeah, man, you were the very first person I ever did a live stream with on my channel. So it's
I
great to have you
know.
back, man.
It was like 3 years ago. We were also cursed because I believe the first time we streamed together, there was a 5-second delay.
There
The
was,
second
yeah.
time, you couldn't hear me for an hour. I can't remember what happened the third time, but something happened. So, hello, everyone. Contrary to popular opinion, I am not dead. I am just retired. I've been watching the destruction of, well, everything from a distance for the past almost year now. Yeah, so I was the angry person that was for a while one of the most hated people in a certain fandom of the show that I've long since turned in my fan card to. But yeah, so I'm here. So Drinker, it is awesome to be back. I think it's been, what, a year since we've streamed together? It's been a while.
It has been a while, yeah. I can't remember the last time you were on. I think it was an open bar of some sort.
I think it may have been the first one.
It might have been, yeah, because that was just when I didn't even really know what it was going to be, and it was like, fuck it, I'll just invite a whole bunch of people and just see what happens, and then it kind of gradually morphed into open bar, but you were good enough to join us for that, so thank you.
Cool.
But yeah, I was going to ask you a little bit about this, just before we go into some of the other stuff that's been happening with Frosk and Henry Cavill and stuff.
She's delightful.
Yeah, she seems like her and Jodie Whittaker, I think, would get on fantastic if they were talking together. They could just have a good old moan about stuff. But yeah, you are not watching Doctor Who anymore, is that right?
Yes, that is true. The last episode I watched was Flux Part 6 last year. To be honest, it got to the point where I don't like watching this anymore. I don't like covering it anymore. It's completely miserable. And I'm now watching the show pretty much destroy itself from a distance, basically through Twitter updates. But yeah, I don't begrudge anybody that's happy with where it's going. You know, I can understand if you're genuinely excited. I am not. Yeah, I like everything 1996 and prior, but not after.
I don't entirely blame you. And, well, you know, it's good, I guess, when you can make that break and just say, I don't care anymore. I'm done.
I'm surprised. Isn't Disney now involved with Doctor Who? Isn't that guaranteed to make everything better like it has everything else?
Oh, it's a mess. From what I know, it's Bad Wolf, which is Russell T Davies' company, is now running it. Bad Wolf is owned by Sony. And outside of the U.S., I believe it's being carried on Disney Plus. They're going to get high ratings with a few David Tennant stories, and then it's going to go right down the crapper again. And from what I've heard, it's not going to be much better than what it was before. Remember, this was 2-3 years ago. We were all excited for the return of Captain Picard. Then we saw what happened. That's what's going to happen with the 10th/14th Doctor. But yeah, it's great not having to watch it, not having to cover it. So I'm happier than I've ever been.
I think it's one of those things that on the surface it seems all great. You know, they've got Russell T Davies back, they've got David Tennant back, yeah, the dream team. And then, yeah, you realize that, well, it's also 2022 and, you know, this show has to be updated for modern audiences.
Dude, just wait for it. We'll have Robert Downey Jr. return to play Iron Man with the Russos directing an Avengers movie or something. It'll be like, guys, look, it's the thing you like.
Yeah. Updated for modern audience. Updated for modern audience should just mean, hey, 2005 called. Can we get a movie like that back? Maybe that should be the updates.
I just take 2005 back at this point.
Yeah, we were spoiled, but yeah, who needs Iron Man when we've got Iron Heart now? You know, I've seen the trailers for Wakanda Forever. I know she's going to be there. She'll be stunning and brave. I guarantee it.
My favorite part about these promotional clips that got released for Black Panther, it's like, these are the 3 clips that they put out there because they wanted people to actually watch them, not so they could get roasted. But you have what the smartest girl in the world, 15-year-old Riri Williams, who builds her own Iron Man suit, who is throwing like space heaters at Wakandan warriors to prevent being body snatched and put into some sort of weird human trafficking situation. Man, you know what? The women took charge of Wakanda, everything went to shit. It's weird, huh?
Well, as on the Real BBC the other night when I was there, subjected Mauler to that clip, and just watching your reaction, Mauler, was kind of interesting because it's like you genuinely seem baffled as to what was happening.
Why would you release those clips to promote the movie? Why would you do that?
I don't know.
Because
bad idea.
those are the best ones.
I was going to say, yeah, there's two possibilities. Either they really misjudged what they should release, and it was just a bad clip, or it's genuinely one of the funniest clips they could pull from the movie, in which case that film is fucked.
Well, what are people generally saying about it? Because I know people have seen it. What's the shills saying? Are they having trouble appraising it, or what?
I saw only one person come out with a less than glowing review. And by less than glowing, I mean he said it was really, really good. It just wasn't quite as good as I thought it was going to be. And predictably enough, I'm pretty sure the wagon circled and he was called a racist. So
yeah, and that's the thing. Like all of them know that they can't criticize this movie. If they do, even if it's for the most genuine, objective reasons possible, they're going to face a mountain of hate. So I think this might be one of the biggest gaps we've ever seen in the critics versus the fan reaction to something. It's going to be right. I think it's going to be huge because these critics do not want to criticize this movie at all, especially obviously with the unfortunate passing of Chadwick Boseman and that's surrounding it. But just the identity politics of the marketing that goes on with this film in particular, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
I'm waiting to see with that whether or not they do, as you know, when Stan Lee died and they rejigged the Marvel intro, so it was all clips of his Stan Lee's cameos in it, and whether they'll do that with Chadwick Boseman in Wakanda Forever, and then if they do that, everyone will say, isn't that a really lovely, heartfelt, touching tribute? And we'll all just forget the fact that they used his Twitter account after he died to market the film. Mm-hmm. In other words, like zombifying an actor that they're now claiming they're really, really going to be careful with. So they'll want us to care an awful lot about what they're doing and pretend that they're being sensitive and sympathetic, but that's not what they are.
That first trailer was like so over the top. Hey guys, you remember that Chadwick Boseman tragically fucking died, right? Go see this movie to support him. Like it was over the top, the amount that they were using his face and his death to promote this. But I mean, we'll see if it pays off.
I think I did kind of, I mean, maybe like is the wrong word, but like I thought the trailer was okay for what it was.
Are we talking about the first one?
Yeah.
The first one I didn't hate. And I mean, look, I thought Chadwick Boseman was a decent actor and a decent dude, but it was how his passing when we found out that he was suffering with that for so long, and he didn't tell anyone, which kind of said a lot about him as a person. And so I kind of was like, I felt the emotions of that trailer from a real life perspective, but as soon as it's like moved into the territory it's in now, it feels really hollow how they're trying to approach this film.
Yeah, I don't think as well, because it's pretty much confirmed that Shuri's going to be the new Black Panther, isn't she?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I just think that's a tough character to sell to people. Like T'Challa was he was perfectly fine. Like he was awesome in Civil War. A bit of a wet rag in his own movie initially, but he's obviously played by a good actor. But with Shuri, it's like she's really annoying. She's really insufferable. She's really arrogant and abrasive. And I just think, Christ, how are you going to get people to buy into her as the new hero for Wakanda? I think that's a tough one. And I just wonder, it probably won't happen because I'm sure this film will be another cultural moment, as they love to say. But it does make me wonder if they're not going to recapture that magic of the first film. Like, they're not going to get such wild, overwhelming critical praise that they did for that first film, because it's the ballpark has just changed so much now.
They can't call it like the first black superhero movie ever, even though they lied about it.
Exactly. Yeah. They can't. There's no more there's no more glass ceilings that they can shatter with this one. This is just like it has to stand on its own merits.
The sequel to Black Panther is the first black superhero movie.
the first sequel to the first black superhero movie ever. Hey, please don't talk about Blade. Please don't talk about Blade.
Wait, is this would they be able to market it as the first black female superhero?
Catwoman.
Storm doesn't count.
Try.
Halle Berry's
Maybe.
Catwoman.
with their own movie. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right though about Shuri. It's like that's her. That's okay to have. That's acceptable to have in a movie where she's like a side character and not the lead. To have one of the just annoying, characters like that. If you're gonna propel her to be the Black Panther going forward, that's a different story. Especially when you're putting in Riri Williams, who's also that type of annoying know-it-all character as a young girl.
It would be like, I don't know, if Han Solo if Harrison Ford got killed or something like in the original trilogy, and they replaced him with fucking C-3PO, and he had to be the new like Han Solo. It's just it's that level of like, no, you're not capable of doing
like
this.
replace him with Watto.
Hey, now Disney could totally market this as the first Black superhero movie with a sequel where the star died. They could totally pull that one off, and I wouldn't put it past them at this point in time.
They will pull every fucking trick to sell this movie to you.
Then they'll blame it on the trolls when they get backlash for it. Typical Disney fashion.
Have all you guys bought your tickets for opening weekend and given them to a black person yet?
Well, I didn't know if that was going to be presumptuous, so I just thought I would bow to each of them that I saw and just apologize.
I'm stuck on which one it's supposed to be, because there was the one person on, was it TikTok, who said that if you go and see it at all, that's probably racist. And then there's the usual one, which is that if you don't go and see it, that means that a black-led film can't draw a white audience because racism. And now there's, according to the editor of whatever magazine that was, if you're buying a ticket as a white person, give it to a black person instead. Are you trying to patronize black people as much as you possibly can? Because that's one way of going about it.
That's exactly what they're doing.
It's weird because I'm well known for wanting to listen to the advice of every random arsehole on Twitter that I encounter, and if they tell me I have to do something, then I have to do it. And oh no, they're giving me conflicting advice. What am I to do?
Listen,
so confusing.
I think that if they really wanted this movie to be successful, you've got a perfect template here, and he's already established that he could play the role. If they just would have brought Robert Downey Jr. back, he could have totally transformed into this role. It would have made $2 billion worldwide, no questions asked.
Lincoln Osiris is Black Panther.
Well, I mean, we've all seen the posters. Ryan Gosling is waiting. He's ready.
Yeah, he can do it.
Somebody cropped. There was a press pack thing with Timothy Chalamet, and somebody cropped it so the last few letters of his name were sort of hidden, and I think it's spelled T'Challa, and so people were saying, oh well, yeah, maybe Tim Chalamet could be recast as the Black Panther. That would be a progressive move.
I think that Wakanda needs to be more inclusive, quite frankly, and they need to let migrants, refugees in, and give them opportunities to succeed. And what better opportunity is there than letting one of them become Black Panther? It's the ultimate success story. Like a poor immigrant child moves to Wakanda, works his way up the ranks, becomes Black Panther.
I think
by punching someone harder than the other guy punched him.
The way I see it is, think of all of the young white men that are out there that have been desperately trying to see themselves as Black Panther for decades and decades, and they just couldn't. I think we really got to give those young white boys something to look up to and inspire them in some way. I'm all for that.
I genuinely couldn't understand any aspect of Black Panther because he doesn't look like me. So clearly I couldn't identify with him, couldn't understand his struggle or his character motivation. Yeah, so that's the only way to let people like us in, I suppose. They've got to look and sound exactly like we do.
That is the Wakandan dream. But it's the other thing I was sort of perplexed by is because I don't know exactly how the law of succession in Wakanda works, but I seem to recall that you could be challenged as king, and if you're challenged as king, then you have to forgo the magic goopy juice, and you can't use the armor, and it's just a fist fight on top of a waterfall. So if Shuri is now Black Panther, does that mean that someone could challenge her, and essentially all they'd have to do to be king of Wakanda is kick a 15-year-old girl off a waterfall? Is that how this society works?
As far as I understand it, yes.
During the coronation is the only time you're allowed to challenge people, right? Isn't that how it works? And so I don't remember that
so
much.
Once you're in as king, then that's your kind of you're locked in. Then I don't think people
even though Killmonger
you.
challenged him into his role, so I don't know exactly, but yes, you are right. She would be stripped of her powers and then forced to fight someone hand to hand. including
Is
people
it
like.
theoretically possible to be Black Panther but not be king of Wakanda or
Oh
queen?
right. So I guess it would be her mum should be having to fight people in a fist fight.
Don't ask questions. Just consume next product.
I
Stop.
want to
See,
see. I want to see
this was-
M'Baku go into a fist fight with his mum. Come on.
if this was House of the Dragon, everything would be laid out in specific detail. We know exactly how the secession was supposed to work and all the different people involved in this. So, just saying.
Everyone's motives.
Mhm.
Isn't that interesting? It's like this sort of medieval culture of of House of the Dragon is actually way more sophisticated and civilized than the hyper progressive Wakanda with their fucking magical bullshit spaceships and their shields over the entire country.
You know, it's like 5 years ago now, or whatever. When I saw that they actually had like a trial by combat for the king, I was fucking blown away. I was like, isn't the whole idea that they're hyper advanced? And then we had God, that was a time on the internet where it was like, it's their culture. Like, what do you mean?
It's fake.
It's made up. They didn't have to make it that way. What do you mean?
Oh, they had to put in this super advanced society, just showing the slums where it just looks like every third world country in America or not America, in the world.
I want some alternate plot where some absolute brute of a man who's just amazing at fighting kills the king during that trial by combat, becomes king, and is just utterly destroys Wakanda just because he's an asshole.
Do we think this movie's actually going to hit like $1 billion? Like, I mean, that's the question.
I got nothing on predicting what the hell's going to happen with this thing.
I tend to believe it's going to be successful, but I thought the last Thor film was going to hit $1 billion too, and I was clearly wrong about that one.
Mm-hmm.
They have hurt. No matter how you feel, like obviously the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been hit significantly for a lot of reasons, and it's still going to do good. It's still going to make decent money, but it's hard to tell how the marketing for this film is going to go. But I don't feel like the buzz is there for the film. I feel like the buzz is there to honor and remember Chadwick Boseman, but I don't feel like the buzz for the film is there, if that makes sense.
I'm not even getting that much of a buzz to remember him. I'm just not seeing a huge amount about it at all. The first one sort of rides the wave of the MCU sort of reaching its peak, or maybe just slightly past its peak, but it was still very near the top. And I think it was, you could argue the rights and wrongs of it, whether it should have been, but it was a cultural moment. I worked in an escape room at the time that film came out. And without fail, if you had a team in to play the escape room and they were majority black team, then they would all do Wakanda Forever. And it was just, everyone did it. And it was week after week after week. And that's the kind of like the on the ground permeation that then that this film has got traction, it's got momentum, and there's something in the cultural waters that's keeping this thing alive. And I'm not seeing anything about it. I've seen a few reviews from people who've seen the pre-screenings. I've not even seen a huge amount of sort of preemptive think pieces attacking fans as racist, which you'd normally know is a sign that the thing's got some, weight behind it. I've seen a few, but I just don't see a huge amount from this film. And every other, you mentioned Thor: Love and Thunder, which sort of, does a really strong opening weekend, and then tanks. That does seem to be the experience of the majority of MCU films these days. And so maybe it's just the case of whether or not the film's any good in its own right. That cultural moment as part of the whole MCU, never mind the specific one to Black Panther, is just gone. And we're not going to see maybe another $1 billion MCU film, certainly not for a while.
Well,
not until Robert Downey Jr. comes back. Go ahead.
No, the climate right now, it's completely different to what it was back in 2018. 2018, we were headed into Infinity War. It didn't really matter what the MCU did, including Captain Marvel.
It's true.
It was going to be huge. But look at where it is now. Like the MCU as a phenomenon ended with, Endgame, maybe the second Spider-Man. But right now, what do they have? They have one good movie in Phase 4, which is technically a Sony movie, so it's not even a Disney movie.
Mm-hmm. No, Chris, you don't understand. They got She-Hulk.
Oh, well, that's where I was going. No, She-Hulk as a comedy is great. I watched the first episode. It was I needed to be put in my place. So,
I heard a lot of people saying
bastard.
Heard a lot of people saying the Geeks and Gamers meetup was all the villains of She-Hulk getting together again.
That's
I did
actually-
see
You're
that.
right, by the way. They could have made any mistakes they wanted when they were around the Endgame Infinity War era, and I think we saw that. Like Captain
Captain
Marvel,
Marvel.
they could just get away with it, yeah. But at
Well, it
this
was like
point now,
they had this giant tidal wave of momentum behind them, and it's like, well, it doesn't matter if they stumble and fall over. That tidal wave's just
Yeah,
going
if-
to push them onward no matter what.
if Thor: Love and
Yeah.
Thunder had come out there, it probably
Oh.
would have made over $1 billion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
now I think that's what's going to happen with Black Panther. Guaranteed good opening weekend, but mystery as to what'll happen after that.
You know what's interesting as well? Like they can't play the same sort of the sort of racial dynamics card that they were able to play with the first one, because the first one was that like Killmonger was the villain and he was like a Wakandan that had been raised in America, and there was that conflict between like black identity in the West versus like their African origins and so on, which they could exploit for everything it was worth. Now they don't have that. They've got this entirely new character who's like just this magical fucking water god thing. I don't even understand what Namor is, and that's just Namor, whatever.
Namor.
He's just
So, I
another
was legit
generic
confused.
Marvel villain who's utterly forgettable. That's what you got here. So I think that's gonna factor into the film's prospects as well.
We have, you guys made a great point of like in the lead up to Endgame. That was a point in time where you had characters that had been built over years that people were invested in. People were rooting for these characters. You don't have that in Phase 4. They have not been able to establish these characters that people are attached to, that people legitimately care about in any more than like the stands on Twitter or something like that. So it's not compelling. People aren't interested in seeing that. And you're seeing the result in the box office and on Disney Plus. And I don't know what they can do to fix that other than a hard turn in Phase 5. But how do you fix the damage that you've already done throughout Phase 4 while still setting up something to get people excited for that at the next level?
You've got to cancel about 50% of the projects that you've got going. You've got to scale everything back and like just focus on making like 3 movies a year, maybe really good quality, get really good directors in and good writers, because at the moment they're trying to make fucking everything. It's just the content sludge pipe that they're trying to maintain, and they don't have enough resources to do it. They don't have enough good writers, they don't have enough time and energy and VFX artists, and that's why you get garbage like She-Hulk coming out. It's just another thing that they can put on Disney Plus to keep people like entertained, theoretically anyway.
Their goal on Disney Plus has been for Marvel specifically to have like something coming out every single week. So even when there's a gap between actual shows, they want to come out with a special or a Werewolf by Night or like whatever it may be, something like that behind the scenes of She-Hulk. So they want every single week, because that's the model, right, for these subscription services, to have something people need to be subscribed for. And it has just become this constant, ever lingering fart cloud of content from woke MCU, and it's just tiring for a lot of people.
It's
Yeah,
also
I've
like
got to keep
the-
up with it, and I haven't. I haven't been able to see Hawkeye or Miss Marvel. I completely missed both of them.
Oh no, what a loss.
I know, and that's the thing. If someone was like, "Oh, you're gonna keep up with them," then it's like, no, I don't even know that it's necessary. I think the most it'll be is there'll be a reference in some movie that someone will be like, "Oh yeah, that was from the show." And I'll be like, "Okay."
Yeah, there's a few things like that. Like if Scar turns up in a subsequent mainline MCU film, for example, then they'll turn around and say, well, if you want to know where he came from, you'll have to subscribe to Disney Plus and watch She-Hulk. But there's that necessity point I think is an important one, because I think, as Ryan mentioned, there hasn't really been any kind of overarching story. The overarching story is the thing that makes you forgive and forget some of the subpar entries from phases 1 to 3, because they're all in some way necessary to understand the major overarching story that everyone is invested in. So even something like Iron Man 3, which is not a good film, but if you want to really understand any reference that's made, for example, about Pepper Potts and Tony's relationship with her, you do kind of need to see it still, even if it's not a very good film, to understand the reference when it's introduced in the mainline Avengers film. We don't have that anymore. And instead all we have is the equivalent stakes of the overarching story, but they're in every single individual film, which has the sort of the really deleterious effect of undermining everything that's gone before it, because what was the point in saving a single universe if Doctor Strange can then introduce an entire multiverse that you have to save, with no overarching plot there either, so nobody really understands the rules of what's going on. If you want to fix it, you need an overarching story, but you need the individual films underneath it, I think, to localize as well as to minimize in number. You need to actually do kind of what No Way Home did, and remind people that these characters live in a place, and that place is probably quite like somewhere you live. And that's the place you need to save in this film. You don't need to save a multiverse nobody can possibly comprehend. You need to save a district of New York, for example. That's how the original MCU started. It's how it built up the stakes from there. If you get back to fewer films with smaller stakes to tease the overarching story with the massive intergalactic struggle, then you've got the recipe for some kind of renewed success. But there's no sign that they're wanting to do that.
Yeah. Think about what they've done just in the past couple entries. The Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, it's not enough to save the world anymore. You have to save the entire fucking multiverse. And then Thor Love and Thunder, oh, by the way, there's this door you can go to and just wish for everything everywhere to be destroyed simultaneously. So the level that we're at is so obscene and unrelatable to people. You're 100% right, Little Platoon. They need to get back. And that's why people were so excited, I think, when you got at the end of the last Spider-Man movie, where you realize that they're kind of setting up Peter Parker to be your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man all on his own, because people are desperate for stories like that again.
Well, that's why Deadpool, that's why the Deadpool announcement went crazy, because no one cares about any of these other characters that you're trying to do stuff with.
Well,
They've
look
all
at
heard it.
Look at Daredevil. Like when he was on Netflix, like he wasn't saving the entire universe or
small
even
contained
world.
story.
He was literally fighting for Hell's Kitchen in New York.
Yes.
That's it. But you were so much more invested in that because the characters were really well written and the stakes were personal to them, but they mattered because we cared about them.
Right, and it felt right. I mean, it was a small contained story. The tone was different, but you weren't bringing it into the bigger world that the MCU had created. So it felt like it was a small thing. It's almost like when you go back to the original Star Wars, and that first movie was a small contained story that felt like it was in a much bigger world, that you could feel the world and you could feel that you were part of that, but you only cared about that small contained story for those three characters that we were with. That's how Daredevil felt. Small, contained, little elements to sprinkle in to let you know this is a bigger thing going on, but that's not the story we're telling, and it felt right. Now it's just, man, it's a clusterfuck everywhere you turn with the MCU at this point. And I was never the biggest MCU fan all through it, but even I cared about the stories they were telling, even in some of the lesser films like Thor: The Dark World. I thought was a really bad movie, but it was still, it carried my interest enough because it took elements of that led to bigger things. These Loki, She-Hulk, none of these things matter. It doesn't matter. No one cares.
Well, Thor: The Dark World is a Shakespearean masterpiece compared to the shit they're putting out now.
Well, I think a big part of what's going on with the MCU, outside of the identity politics, outside of the bad writing, part of this was inevitable. It's suffering. Same thing with Star Wars and many other franchises. It's suffering from franchise burnout. And part of it is because it became so big. 2018, 2019, the MCU was everywhere. And how long I say was, not is now, but this was the biggest franchise in history. And it's inevitable. Eventually, the general public is going to get sick of it. And the problem is they've compounded that by, well, I guess it didn't help that their first movie in Phase 4 was based off a character that they'd already killed. But lackluster movies, terrible TV series, even the effects on She-Hulk. I'm like, it's, and you can even tell that from the franchise itself. It's kind of like where Star Trek was, say, back at around 2005. You can tell everybody behind it is burned out. And I don't think it's going to get any better. The only way you can save something like this is to have it go away for a bit. And my the rule I go by is that British show should have done is go away for at least 5 years But no, you're still hitting people with movies. You're hitting people with, God, was it 5 or 6 TV series now? It's like, I don't want to watch them, even if it wasn't for the identity politics issues. I'm burned out on it. I think a lot of people are burned out on it, and that's a major problem with Disney Plus. The two franchises that they're relying on more than anything else, being Star Wars and the MCU, they're both burned out at this point. And the only MCU movie that was successful was based on nostalgia from previous eras before the MCU. So I think it was going to come to this, but I think they've made it worse with the way they've approached it.
See, I disagree that it's burnout. I think it's simply terrible storytelling and terrible writing. And I mean, even look at something like Game of Thrones. Now, I didn't really watch House of the Dragon just because I was so burnt by Game of Thrones season 8. I didn't think it was going to be very successful. Holy shit. That they could, all they did, what did they do? Good storytelling, good character development, and you won everyone back, generally speaking. Obviously, it didn't quite hit the numbers that Game of Thrones season 8 hit, or some of the previous seasons, but it still won people over. If the MCU had the right mindset at the end of Endgame to develop the next phase of the MCU, it really was, Gary was right, MCU. Like, they had an agenda to push identity politics and not tell good stories. Same with Star Wars. Star Wars will be successful if it's done right. It just will. You've just ruined it so bad. I guarantee you tomorrow, if they blow up Lucasfilm and they get the right people in there, the enthusiasm will be through the roof. If you start bringing it back and you start developing stories that people care about, Star Wars will be a $2 billion film franchise the next film they release if they do it right.
I think an advantage that Star Wars had, or Game of Thrones had, kind of what I was saying, or you need a little bit of a break. There was a 3-year break between House of the Dragon and season 8. I think had House of the Dragon come out maybe even 6 months later, I think it would have been a disaster. So that's why I think part of the problem is when you keep throwing, I think at one point around Endgame, they had, 5 movies within a year? I think when you throw so much at the audience, they become sick of it. Whereas if you take your time, and I'd say even maybe a 2 or 3 year break for the MCU might be a good thing, like finish phase 4, take a break, then go back to it. People will be interested in it again the same way we were with Game of Thrones.
I agree
ages,
in that
right?
I think the smarter thing that they should have done was after Endgame, they should have done what you've suggested, is take a break. Maybe not for years, but for several months at least, not produce any more movies, no TV shows, and then really take the time to let people recharge their batteries, really plan out the next phase, and kick it off with a bang. But it's like, what did we get? We got Black Widow, which is like you said, a character that's already dead, and it was a flop anyway because it was a shit film, and that pretty much set the tone for what Phase 4 was going to be. And then it just became this almost frantic rush to get as much shit out there as possible. It was like watching fucking Mike Zero or something. It's like, gotta make more content constantly. It doesn't matter if it's garbage and meaningless. It doesn't matter. Just more.
Hey, my channel is under attack right now, Winter, all right?
Just on the burnout thing, just very quickly, because I think the burnout isn't just with the audience. I mean, the burnout is also with the writers. House of the Dragon is kind of unique in 2 respects. It's based on pre-written source material, and it's the only Game of Thrones spin-off that's come out. So not only has there been a long break between Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, it's the only thing they've had to work on, and they've had the roadmap set out for them by the guy who actually created the franchise.
But they did have that Blood Moon as well, which got shit canned after the pilot because it was so terrible.
I missed it. Was so bad I missed that completely. The problem, I think, there's a sort of lack of confidence maybe with Disney and the MCU in the sense that I think they probably thought, well, if we wind down, not only will we make less money because think of all the opening weekends that we'll miss if we stop making content, but there's also the replication crisis, and it's not just that they're churning out content, it's that everyone is trying to copy them. So principally the DCEU, obviously, and I think there might have been the fear of losing ground against a revamped DCEU. So you have to keep going with the content to keep that sort of place of priority above what DC is doing all the time. And I think you can kind of draw a broad analogy in sort of films go in eras, that they go in sort of ages. You have the age of the Western, where the Western emerges in sort of the 50s and 60s. It's incredibly successful. Then everyone does them. And the burnout isn't just because people have run out of stories to tell, and it's not just because the audience is bored of them. It's because everyone is doing them. And so everyone has to keep doing them to keep on top of their rivals. And so by so doing, they've run out of steam. You go to the 70s and 80s, and Star Wars really kicks off this sci-fi revival. Everyone does Star Wars sci-fi stuff. If you've got Star in the name, they called Battlestar Galactica Battlestar Galactic because it had Star in the name. You carry on with sci-fi, and you get burnout from that as well. Then you get fantasy in the early 2000s with The Lord of the Rings, and everyone keeps doing that. And these things sort of just go in epochs. I don't know really that there's a huge amount that anyone can do to stop that sort of progression of time. And it might just be that we are in the dying embers of the superhero era of film. Maybe no one's going to improve on this. Maybe you can't do any better.
I genuinely, personally, I'm done with it. Like, it just doesn't hold much interest for me anymore. I think there's always that quest for innovation, isn't there? There's always that desire to give each movie a unique selling point. You know, it's like the first whatever character, or it's a unique spin on the superhero genre, whatever it might be, something that you can use to market your film or your character, whatever it might be. And it feels like we're reaching that saturation point now where it's like, well, every major avenue's been explored already. Like, where can we possibly go from here? And yeah, it ties into like what you guys have been saying, that sometimes a break is needed. You know, sometimes you need to just like take that step back, let people recharge their batteries, give them a rest.
Cynical point of view, maybe, but I'm still, out of all the perspectives here, I'm with Jeremy. I think that if they were good, nobody would give a fuck. Nobody would be saying this fatigue. I remember a certain video about Thor: The Dark World from, I think it was Red Letter Media, I'd have to check, where they talk about how it's official, superhero fatigue is set in, nobody cares anymore. And it's like, it's hilarious to look back at Thor: The Dark World and think, oh, yeah, that's where fatigue was setting in. Yeah,
I think, look,
imagine the narrative around.
About,
sorry.
I'll be quick. We all talked about No Way Home, and we watched that, and it was like, holy shit! Like, this is a reminder that superhero movies can actually be quite investing, and if you've got good characters, good actors, there's a kind of interesting gimmick to play with. It can get you sucked in, and you can enjoy it. It can still work, but man, those things are just becoming rarer and rarer now.
Yeah, I mean, imagine the narrative around House of the Dragon if it sucked. It'd be like Game of Thrones is over. No, we can never. They would never need to make another. And because it's well written. And again, I'm basing us on everyone else is saying that, but it's not that we need a break. It's that they need to slow down. Like, why was Star Wars so special for so long? Because it was an event when it happened, because it was every few years, obviously the big gap. But like when you got the prequels, it was like, okay, we got the first one, or you go back. There was an event around the Marvel movies when they first started to come out. They took a few years, but now they're filling in like all these gaps with all this dog shit. It's not that they need a break. It's that they need to slow down and stop, just like Drinker said, Mike zeroing the MCU. Yeah. It's just way too much content, and it doesn't feel special anymore.
That's like the thing. It is the streaming thing, but sorry.
No, I'll let you go.
Oh, no, I was going to say, that's sort of like the compatibilist position, which is that you're right. It's not a hard-coded law of the universe that movie fatigue sets in, or that you're right to say it is bad writing fatigue. I completely agree with that. But the question is sort of the underlying systemic one. Why is there bad writing fatigue? Well, that's because of bad writing. Why is the bad writing? What is it about film studios and their writing teams which is producing this kind of thing? And it's the underlying question that produces bad writing fatigue. So bad writing fatigue explains why the audience is sick and tired of this stuff. It doesn't explain why that phenomenon is arose to begin with. And I would still be the pessimist and say that that's because it's a deep underlying thing that no one can fix. But I would agree with the bad writing point.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like Stranger Things. I feel like we were starting to get Stranger Things fatigue for season 3. Yeah. Because why? Because it wasn't good. And suddenly 4 comes out, and it's good, and everyone is in love with it again, and everyone's talking about it again. And so that's kind of where I just look at it. And I mean, I felt the fatigue for Stranger Things because I was like, this isn't good. I don't want to watch this anymore during season 3. And now we're back at it with season 4 being good.
That's a really good point, actually. And
if Western fatigue set in at one point in history, it's like as if these days I give a shit about Western fatigue. I was like, if you give me a good Western, I'll watch it. I don't
Yeah.
care if there's too many westerns or
But then,
whatever.
but then you didn't live through the 50s and 60s where you were probably getting like you go to the movies and like fucking every movie that was
Well, no,
playing
but I
was a
lived
western.
through the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020, just constant superheroes, and I am still. If all of you guys said, "Oh, that new movie Captain Manpower came out and it's really good," I'd be like, "Oh shit, okay, I'll check it out." And if
Yeah.
it was, I wouldn't then be like, I was going to enjoy it, but man, just too many superhero movies. So
And we're only what, like 10 months, because I think it came out around Christmas. We're 10 months removed from No Way Home hitting almost $2 billion at the box office. You know, so there is, and obviously a lot is to that with Toby and Andrew Garfield coming back, but obviously that did crazy numbers. And I think it does come down to a little bit of both worlds, really. Stop shitting out the constant garbage, but also if it's good, people are going to support it. But with the MCU, you've seen nearly every single box office release post Endgame have very similar results in terms of that first weekend drop off. You're seeing consistent 67, 68, 69% drops in that second weekend. It's because that's how Marvel and how Disney have like trained their audiences. Hey, it's a big event. It's a big event. You got to go see it first weekend. You got to go see it. You got to go see it. Well, it comes out and then, all right, well, I guess let's get ready for the next one. That's like the attitude and the attention span right now of the audience that they have trained.
True.
weird
I'd put money
position
on
we're
it, though.
in.
If we're still here in 20 years, if we haven't been nuked off the earth by Mr. Putin or drunk ourselves to death or whatever, 20 years' time, reconvene, I'll put money on the most common, highest grossing films out in the cinema at that time will not be superhero films, and we'll have got far fewer of them, and they'll all be back down to the quality we had in the late 90s. There'll be a new phase at that
Perfectly
point.
reasonable,
Like, in terms
but I'm
of-
also not sure. It could be. I don't know.
It's going to be
It feels
gay
like
romantic comedies. Actually.
It'll be like I think we're going to pivot back to action at some point, but like yeah, this genre has had an unusually long run in cinemas, because really you can go all the way back to like 2000 with the first X-Men movie that kind of kicked it off, and like, you know, the MCU followed a few years after that, but like that's been it for the past 20 years. We have had a really steady stream of superhero films, and it's only gotten more extreme over time. And that is a long time for any genre to be like reigning supreme in the box office in Hollywood. It does feel like, I don't know, man, like maybe there is going to be a shift at some point.
I don't know. All I know is there's like 45 Fast and Furious films. So if you
There's that.
so if you make your audience happy, I guess people will show.
And that's been
Even
going
with,
on for 21 years too.
Even with Top Gun succeeding the way that it did, it's like, what does that tell them? It's like probably just more Top Gun sequels, not necessarily a genre shift, right? Like,
Yeah.
All fighter
I think
pilots.
so.
yeah, all fighter pilot movies.
Yeah, we just need more planes. But that was such a fun movie to review, because I was like, holy fuck! For once, I'm not talking about a fucking comic book movie. Like it's something different. And you know, it was relief. You know, it's relief to know that other movies, other genres can succeed on that same scale. So yeah, that, I don't know, maybe everyone kind of felt that way to some degree. It didn't mean like I didn't want any more superhero movies ever. It was just like, it's nice to have a palate cleanser once in a while.
It's nice. It's nice that they can't race swap characters in original stories, so we wouldn't have that to complain about, I suppose, like
That
we
is
do
true,
in
yeah.
Black Panther.
That might actually be the determiner as to what does come next, though. It's not necessarily based on... You can't sit here now and say this genre will be the next big thing. It might be the case that the next big thing, whatever it is, will be the first thing that gets over this weird modern fetish for hating its audience. So Top Gun did that. Top Gun quite clearly does not hate its audience. It quite likes them. If you get over... And, you know, the MCU is currently in the mire when it comes to hating its audience, and Rings of Power as well, and so many modern productions fail because they create this division before they've even come out. If you have a film that can somehow create this sense of cultural unity and actually capitalize on optimism like the MCU did when it first began, that might determine, the first one to do that might determine the next big sort of cultural shift moment. But it's a fool's game to try and predict what that's going to be at this point.
I tend to believe that superheroes are always going to be relevant in the public sphere, and they always have been. And when you start telling good stories surrounding them, it really goes to another level. I mean, Batman, for instance, has always been part of our lives in some capacity. Sometimes he was a running joke, and all of a sudden Batman 89 came out. It was a cultural phenomenon. But then you got to Batman and Robin, and it became a big meme. But then you moved into the era of the Nolan films and the Arkham games, and then Scott Snyder's run. And like Batman was dominating every single area of entertainment. He was on top of everything. It wasn't the first time Batman had been in a video game, but it was the first time he was in a great video game. And so as long as you're doing superheroes right, I feel like they're going to dominate that aspect of things.
Was there an element of, I don't know how accurate this is, but, you know, post 9/11, that early 2000s period, was there something about that kind of almost inspired a need for superheroes or a desire to see them? You know, characters like, you know, Superman or Batman or whatever, like this feeling of like, well, there's an order of things. There's a right and wrong, and good's going to triumph over evil, because it's almost like people were so shook by everything that had gone on. They needed to gravitate towards stuff like that to give them some kind of solace. I don't know, like, but I know that was when superhero movies just exploded in popularity.
That was a big part of the marketing for Spider-Man 2002, which came out,
it was,
I think, maybe 6 months after. And the original trailer, which came out, I think, maybe 2 months before, actually had the spider web in between the World Trade Towers.
Mm-hmm.
You can still find that. Obviously, it was removed by the time the movie came out. But even in some reshoots for the movie itself, it was, you know, we're all in this together New York scenes. So it could have come from that, but then again, it really started, I guess, with X-Men, which is about a year before.
Yeah, I mean, X-Men really did kind of get the ball rolling for sure. And if you look at some of those films that came out in that era, if they would have came out, 5, 6, 7 years ago from now, they would have been billion-dollar films, but they were just laying the groundwork.
Yeah, I do think it's an interesting point in terms of the way people's psyche were, and the idea of all of a sudden you feel vulnerable, not just in the United States, but a global thing on such a big scale. That the idea of watching these things with people that are triumphing over evil, with these people there to protect the regular everyday citizens from things going on. There might be something to that type of content, how it started taking off.
It's important. It's a reaction as well to this sense that you have to protect yourselves, and goodness is to be found among the people, because not only have you been attacked from outside, but your government has completely failed to protect you. And you can see sort of the proliferation of spy and espionage thrillers after Watergate, for example, as another film reaction to and Vietnam as well, which is this cultural zeitgeist which says that actually, you know, the true good men are the people who are uncovering the corruption above them, and they are serving the people as people themselves, as opposed to relying on people above them. The cultural zeitgeist determines the character of films. You can trace like the old Godzilla films from Japan, sort of all Godzilla films from like the 50s through to the 90s and 2000s. You can sort of trace Japanese cultural attitudes to government and to the issue of nuclear proliferation, nuclear weapons, and nuclear power based on the origin story for Godzilla. If Godzilla is created in the 50s from Japanese experiments with nuclear power stations in the 90s, when they don't care about that anymore, he's created by nuclear weapons tests in the Pacific, which they do care about at that time. And all of these things are manifest in film. And so it's a really sort of culturally fascinating thing to watch sort of the cultural psyche develop through film as a medium, because it does reflect so well what people think. Quite often it reflects what sort of their intellectual betters think, which is a problem, and that's why some film franchises eventually fail. But oftentimes it's the really popular ones of what people generally feel about their general state in the world, as opposed to specific.
What do you think the Matthew Broderick Godzilla reflected?
That was nuclear tests in the Pacific, I believe.
It was.
It was also a very, very silly film.
Since we have so many really good opinions and good takes on here, I want to ask the panel, why did Dredd fail so miserably? That is the thing that I can't figure out. Such a damn good, fun, badass movie, and it failed. And not the Stallone one, not the I Am the Law. But
I
like
great.
that
a
one.
Combination of two things. One, I don't think it was marketed particularly strongly, and two, there was no big names in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like Carl Urban's awesome, but like he's not a draw.
Yeah.
If
And
you could
I think
release
if
right
you-
now, it would do better
Yeah.
or worse.
But yeah, it's just
I wish
I
that
think,
film would have. I wish that film would have gotten more love. I felt like the word of mouth should have really helped that movie, and I thought it was going to, and it just never really picked up because obviously the marketing wasn't great, and we can all point to that. But we've seen other films that didn't have a lot of marketing, but that word of mouth really took them, and word of mouth surrounding Dredd was phenomenal. It was fantastic.
What year did Dread come out? Remind me.
Oh,
2012.
12 or
Yeah,
I think so.
somewhere in there.
I think that kind of answers the question. If it were released today, would it do better? I think the answer is yes. 2012, it's not part of this sort of zeitgeist moment. So 2012, you're coming off sort of the back end of Obama-era optimism, and people are souring on it, but it's still roughly there. You don't really have things like urban decay, crime, and slums as major cultural issues. Whereas now, if you're tracking the US midterms, you see that things like crime are very, very high up in people's lists of concerns. If you're talking about a film like Dredd, which really is a sign and a show about a form of social decay, it would do better in an atmosphere where those things are at the top of people's minds all the time. People will go and see that kind of film. People like dystopias where there is this sense of overbearing government control or societal collapse or things like that. You didn't have that in 2012. I think you do have that now. If you released a film like Dredd, or even if you re-release Dredd now, it probably, I would guess, would do better now than then, but that would be a guess.
Good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, I think as well, like there wasn't the same degree of fan base behind the comics, the 2000 AD comics, that there would be with something like Batman or the Fantastic Four or something like that. It's obviously got a fan base, but it's not like such a broad appeal as some of these other ones. And I think all of those things combined together just probably torpedoed it.
It is interesting how because there is no method to the madness sometimes. What was the Tom Cruise movie that had the terrible marketing was a really good movie? Live, Die, Repeat is what they ultimately called it. Edge of Tomorrow. And I loved Edge of Tomorrow. And you've got one of the biggest movie stars in history in it, and the word of mouth was there, but it never really took off. And it was mainly
a flop box office wise.
I don't know if it was an absolute flop, but it definitely didn't do well. I don't know if it lost money, but it definitely underperformed.
Dude, I have so much fun watching that movie.
Fantastic.
Genuinely,
movie.
it's like Emily Blunt's awesome in it.
Yes.
Tom Cruise is great fun. It's so well done.
I want to go to the universe where, like the success of John Wick, transfer that over to Dredd maybe, or even Edge of Tomorrow, because that one worked out, and I assume it's because John Wick is much cheaper to make. Edge of Tomorrow is probably quite expensive.
Yeah.
Thinking about it. Dredd was probably cheap to make though, right? Comparatively.
I would think so.
He's mostly just walking around corridors shooting people, isn't he? So
I think that's all we want, right? As long as he's a character.
they got Dredd as a character. They did him justice, I think.
Yeah, I'm looking at the top grossing movies of 2012 as well. It's interesting. That is just for, I think, domestic. But you've got Avengers, you've got Dark Knight Rises, you've got The Hunger Games. There's your dystopian future. You've got
the Dark Knight Rises come out the same year as Avengers.
Holy shit! Yeah, it did.
A couple months after, yeah. Skyfall is up there. Your favorite Daniel Craig James Bond drinker.
Oh, I love Daniel Craig. Yeah, I can't get enough of him.
The Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 2. The Amazing Spider-Man. Brave, The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey.
Wait, this was all in the same year?
In 2012. These are the top domestic box office.
So there's a big drop-off in quality after the top two on that list.
Wow. Dude, I'm poisoned to the point where I was just like, why aren't you naming superhero movies? What's going on? What's all these other films? What?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Shit. But hey, it's okay. Henry Cavill is going back to playing Superman, which is all good news. And I think most of us would probably agree that I just want to see him in a good Superman movie. He's waited 10 years for this. I think he's earned it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it takes freaking Warner Brothers being $50 billion in debt to get new management in there to look around and be like, what the fuck are we doing? Well, why are we investing in two different Black Superman projects? Why are we trying to replace Superman with Latinx Supergirl. Let's get Henry Cavill back in here and let's make some fucking money. It shouldn't be that hard of a decision, but finally we got there somehow.
And everybody knows I hate Man of Steel. I hate BBS. I hate Snyder's Vision. Shout out to Zack Snyder though. Good, he's a great guy. He loves geeks and gamers. But
he actually RSVP'd for the meetup. We had to turn him away. So.
Yeah.
He's always like, Drinker, come on, let me on open bar. And I was like, nah, you're not good enough to that. Sorry.
Yeah, you're not associated with us there, Zacky Poo. But yeah, I am really excited for Henry Cavill returning as Superman because even though I don't like the movies, he is the perfect casting. And it's not even close. And seeing his appearance at the end of Black Adam, obviously they're tapping into the Superman that I want him to be, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do. But he deserves it. He's a great guy. He's an icon, and hopefully they give us, a Superman that inspires and everything like that. So we'll see. I'm excited about it though.
How crazy must that be, though, to have been actors listening to Zach talk about the many, many years of the future that's going to be for these storylines? It all comes crashing down. Not even sure you're playing the character anymore, and then Warner Brothers are like, "We have a new plan. You're with us." You're like, "Okay." And then The Rock is like, "Can't wait for us to lead the DCU." You're like, "Yeah, sure, whatever."
I mean, it's just like Ryan. I know you keep up with a lot of this stuff. So, like, what are the discussions going on? Are they going to reboot, basically a soft reboot? Like, what is the plan?
I don't know. Hearing? So, what I know about the Flash is that they brought Henry Cavill in to do footage, to do shooting for it. I think in either late August or early September. The same time where Ezra Miller was back on set for Warner Brothers doing additional photography for the Flash. Henry Cavill was in town. This is before everything was confirmed. Henry Cavill was in town. Ben Affleck was in town, and Gal Gadot. They were all in LA at the exact same time. So I think all those people are going to be in the Flash. I don't think you're going to be rebooting it. I think there might be a couple things that change with this Flashpoint. No fucking idea what they're really going to do with it. But from what it sounds like, there's going to be an actual standalone Henry Cavill movie in the future. The entire future of Black Adam has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with how this performs at the box office. And honestly, it got saved because it got announced that it's going to have a Chinese release. If it didn't have that, this movie would fucking lose money, and it's not even close. Like, this movie is not doing well at the box office, and solely because it will be released in China is why it may be profitable. But I don't know what the plan is. James Gunn is coming in to oversee the DC universe. I liked the Suicide Squad. I thought it was fine, but I don't think that, if he's just picking who's going to do movies, if he's kind of running the thing, maybe that'll work out. I know anything's better than what they had going on.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, it's they can knock it out of their own way. They need to have a clear vision for what they're doing. They need to stop trying to be like Marvel, because they had half the time they were trying to be like Marvel, half the time they're trying to create something else. It just, none of it worked. I mean, we're talking about a company that thought for all of my problems with Snyder's movies, to think that Joss Whedon was going to carry out Snyder's vision would not that's just not it's not a good template. Like, I would have much rather seen a Joss Whedon from the ground up.
Wait.
Then
so you're saying
that's why. That's what
so you're saying to me that
right?
you didn't want to see more of. Hold on.
In the mustache, or...
Yeah, you just want to see more of this.
Hope is like your fucking keys there, kid. Don't worry, it'll come back.
It just gets me every time.
Even if you lose them, you'll find it again. God,
I think the idea was that they got him to finish it under the promise he would get his own projects to build from the ground up, right? Like Batgirl. And he said Black Girl.
Hey, Wally, that's what it became. So
yeah, I think because it was just a disaster. Yeah, because you are right.
Yeah, I know. I'll give Whedon a little bit of credit. They brought him in at the 11th hour when the movie was essentially shot, and it's like, fix this, please. It's a disaster. And,
yeah, I don't necessarily blame him as much as just like, why would you think that would be the guy that could take Snyder's vision and do anything?
It's because the entire way that this was framed from the beginning was we have to chase Marvel. And that's why the direction of the DCEU is so boom, 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 like back and forth, because they were constantly trying to play this game that they didn't need to. And ironically, now you're seeing with people getting tired, at least of bad movies in Marvel, but people are just looking for something else other than the Marvel formula. And ironically, I think if they had stayed the path, they would have presented people with, hey, we're not trying to be Marvel lights, which you would never be able to succeed with what they had laid out. But we're trying to be something different, like an alternative that people could still enjoy and get into. And but they wanted, hey, make this Avengers. That's what they did. That's the same thing they did with David Ayer's Suicide Squad movie. They're like, hey, let's beat the shit out of this until it looks like a Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
But then, ironically, their most successful ones are exactly like you've said. It's when they go completely the opposite direction. They do something like Joker, which is like dark, gritty, like R-rated, a serious movie. Same thing with The Batman. You know, they went like super gritty and grounded with that. That's the good alternative to Marvel. That's what you should be aiming for. But then there's only so many characters they can use that can do that kind of thing. And also, there was always that desire to, well, we want to do our own version of the Avengers. We want to have the big team-up movie. We want to make a shit zillion dollars. We want to just start churning this stuff out and get consistent hits again and again.
Fast forward all the build-up for that as well. But which direction is it going in, though? Because you've got, obviously, they brought James Gunn in from, is it May next year? I think he officially joins. And you've got Henry Cavill saying that he wants to give everybody a Superman who is bright and cheerful and optimistic and hopeful. Combine bright, cheerful, optimistic, hopeful, and James Gunn, that would suggest to me more of a Marvel direction than a darker, grittier one. But
well, I think the problem they've had as well is like these dark, gritty movies don't tie into the larger extended DC universe. They're just like these weird standalone projects that don't have necessarily much franchise potential.
They're too afraid to go that way. They're too afraid to make because they're still trying to replicate Marvel. The idea that you brought James Gunn in, there's going to be a Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 released while James Gunn is like head of the DC universe. You know what I mean? Like, how crazy is that to think about?
At this point, Marvel are probably like, "Oh yeah, like they dumped the boyfriend, threw him out of the house, and then he found another girl, and now they're like, fuck you, like finish Guardians 3 and get out of here." It's like, all right.
Well, the problem is DC has Superman and fucking Batman. You shouldn't be chasing anybody. You shouldn't be trying to mimic anybody. But you should be the Pied Piper. You should be the company that's creating the standard that everybody else is trying to follow. And the fact that they're following characters like Iron Man and Hulk and all those characters are great and everything. They are nothing compared to Batman and Superman in the hierarchy of superheroes. It's just not. It's not even close. So they need to realize that.
Is the extended universe thing itself kind of a problem? I mean, if you look at the most successful, I think the Nolan Batman trilogy's got to be considered the most successful of the sort of the DC hero films for however long, not notably part of an extended universe. Right. Is the obligation or the sense of obligation to tie it into this grander story, to replicate Marvel in the structure as well as in sort of the tone and the style itself kind of, would they maybe better, given their experience with standalone films recently, to actually just focus on sort of self-contained, maybe 3-episode arcs or 3-film arcs, and then just move on and don't try and create this overarching story?
Creatively, yes. Financially, no.
Yeah, good point.
Well, I think that the reason Marvel did it is because they didn't have let's not forget, Iron Man was not a A-list character before Robert Downey Jr. took that role. He just wasn't. He was a B-list character in the comics. He was never Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, Wolverine. He was never those guys. So Marvel did all of that knowing that they didn't have the megastar. So DC doesn't need to collaborate with these characters to create successful films. They just don't. Wonder Woman doesn't need that. Wonder Woman's an icon. So DC doesn't need to do that. Marvel needed to do that. Captain America was not an A-lister before the MCU made him into an A-lister. DC doesn't have that problem, but they act like they have that problem. They act like, oh, Superman needs Batman and Batman needs Superman and Wonder Woman has to be there. Like, no, you don't. They don't need that.
I think the difference is, like, you can use that as a launch pad for smaller characters. Like, who would have given a fuck about Ant-Man but then when he's tied into a larger extended universe, it's like, well, I kind of need to watch his movie because it's probably going to have things in it that tie into like the larger narrative that I'm really invested in. That's your rising tide that lifts all ships, you know. Whereas,
We'll
yeah,
talk about Batman,
you're exactly
Batman,
right.
though.
You've got Batman, you've got Superman, you've got Wonder Woman, but kind of beyond that, you don't have many more characters that have got that kind of name recognition for the general public. And so
You tell me
maybe
a
you need
Booster
that-
Gold movie wouldn't make money? Are you kidding me?
Here's just out of curiosity, who cares about Ant-Man though?
I mean,
No.
yeah.
I
I
really
like
care
the
about
first
what they-
one. I like the first movie, but I never would have cared about it if it wasn't. I'm not looking forward to the next Ant-Man story. I'll put it that
neither am
way.
I.
Yeah, who gives a shit about Quantum Mania?
Yeah, I do care very deeply about what they did to Wasp's hair. They fucking butchered it. So they just wanted to make her look like another generic Marvel lesbian, I guess. But yeah, that is the thing, and that's what you can do is when you do have these characters, all of a sudden Ant-Man can make 500, 600, 700 million dollars just because it's connected to all this stuff and people want to tell the story. For DC, like part of the mandate was, hey, we have to make a Superman movie, then we need to introduce Batman, then we need to have a Justice League movie. Like that was what Warner Brothers wanted to do. They wanted to fast track to an Avengers level event.
Yeah.
And they should have just taken their time with it. They didn't. And ever since then, it's just been hey, a lot of people thought it was too dark. Let's tweak everything that we were planning because of this reaction. All right, hey, that wasn't so great. Let's do it the exact fucking opposite this time. And it's just not a way to plan. And that's why you've seen chaos at Warner Brothers and DC over the past 5 or 6 years, because nobody there has been able to stick to a plan. And it's to the point where basically everyone got fired. They're bringing in Henry Cavill again, and they're trying to, because you also can't reboot it necessarily because they see this tangible, hey, Wonder Woman was well received. Now, people hated Wonder Woman 84, but they're still thinking about that first Wonder Woman. Aquaman made $1 billion fucking dollars, so they don't want to
never
recast
understand how
Jason
that
Momoa.
made $1 billion.
And Jason Momoa took his shirt off, and all these thirsty women out there in their late 30s and 40s who are now making She-Hulk. All these thirsty women out there went and saw it, and but yeah, so they're really stuck in this weird place, and I don't know what the hell they're gonna do.
They are really, they've got a really shit situation that they're in, and like I'm in the same position. If someone was to hand me the reins of the DCEU and say, right, fix this, I would not know what the fuck to do. Like, because the obvious temptation is just like, cut your losses, reboot the entire thing, we're going to start over, because this is fucked. But then, yeah, like you say, you've got characters and you've got franchises that have real potential, but it's like they don't have the ability to tie it together into a cohesive, overarching story. That's the thing that they just don't know how to do. And yeah, okay, Cavill's back. Fuck knows what's going on with Affleck. Who's the Batman now? Don't know. Like, it's all over the place. And yeah, I don't know how they can unify this into some kind of cohesive storyline that's going to drive everything forward. It is a mess right now.
I can think of like one production I'd be quite interested in seeing. You get Ricky Gervais in, because he specializes in really awkward sitcoms. Ricky Gervais to do essentially kind of a documentary style production of Ezra Miller's first day back on set, and then just make it as awkward and comedic as you possibly can. And you would just need to film actual footage.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Like that would be good. And Ezra Miller, who is accused of all this vile shit, because they are broke. I think that's the thing that people forget. Warner Brothers is broke. They're trying to cut all the costs they can. Remember a couple months ago when the report came out that Warner Brothers only has enough money left for this fiscal year to release 2 movies, Black Adam and Don't Worry, Darling. Don't Worry, Darling was a complete and total flop. Black Adam, it could still be a flop depending on what happens with China. This is a company that's $50 billion in debt. So they don't have the ability to be like, hey, Ezra Miller's grooming people and breaking into people's houses drunk and spitting on people. They cannot sacrifice that $200 million that they've spent. They just can't do it financially. They have to find a way to make him palatable to people.
That's a tough sell. That really is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get your point. Like they've already shit canned a whole bunch of movies. They killed Batgirl. They've killed Supergirl. Like, one was obviously complete, the other one was just in the early stages, but like that's a lot of money down the drain. And yeah, how bad must it be that you actually kill an entire movie and never release it?
From the same company that put out Birds of Prey.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
Damn.
This
That is
was
true.
great.
But the flip side to Cavill coming back as Superman is that, oh no, he had to leave The Witcher, which I'm sure, well, I don't know what your opinions about this are, like whether you're gutted that he's leaving The Witcher or whether you just don't give a shit. Like, I fall into the don't give a shit camp because I
That's where
just
I'm
don't
at.
care about that show now.
Oh, I don't even follow that camp. I follow. I'm happy that it's happening. I'm very happy that he's leaving The Witcher and embarrassing these people, because he came out. He gave people warning signs in season 2. There was an interview out there with him, and he's like, "Listen, I'm a big fan of the source material. I don't agree with some of the ways we're going, but I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna do my best." And we saw these Witcher writers, that writers room that did all this bullshit, the social justice messaging. They would be constantly tweeting out. You look at nearly every Witcher writer's profile on Twitter, and it looks interesting to say the least. Like, you saw this coming a mile away. First season of Witcher, I thought was very good, but it was clear they were placing way too much significance on people that were not Henry Cavill. Season 2 only doubled down on that. So I'm glad. Get him the fuck out of there. That's the only reason that show had any notoriety, was because of him in the first place. They're not doing justice to it. They're butchering the source material. Go fuck yourselves. Henry Cavill said, "You don't know the lore as well as I do. I'm leaving."
He was absolutely carrying it. But yeah, listen, before we go on, I know Jeremy and Ryan, I know you guys have got a bunch of stuff that you need to be doing pretty much now, and you're kind of out of time. So yeah, I will let you guys go. But I want to say thanks to both of you for coming on for this. It's been great to chat to both of you again.
Yeah, hey, thank you for having us. It's always a pleasure to be here. It's been a hell of a few weeks for us, and we're still got a few more other things going on here in Orlando. So thank you to everybody that showed up to the Geeks and Gamers meetup, Nerdrotic meetup, Friday Night Tights, and we'll be live on Friday Night Tights tomorrow on Nerdrotic's channel. So thank you guys for having us.
That's right. Gary's still alive.
Yeah,
I think he made it. He
Gary
had
made
a
it.
long week. Yeah.
He had a long week. He lost his voice. He got to go to Universal and actually see Marvel, not Disney-fied, which is actually beautiful when you have to go to Universal, because they can't use, I guess they can use some stuff there, but the Marvel section at Universal actually feels like 90s Marvel. So you don't see all the bullshit. And what's the best part of it?
They're the Black Panther Snuggie.
It was a Black Panther Snuggie. And on the front of it, it was a white guy who looked just like what's his face from the meme. Drawing a blank now. What's it? Ryan Gosling.
Ryan Gosling.
He looked just like Ryan Gosling. He was on the box of the Black Panther Snuggie. Just this white guy standing there smiling.
Yeah. Finally a Snuggie for me. Yeah. But no, it's been great. Thanks for having us, man. Appreciate coming on, and nice to see you and talk to all you guys again.
Yeah, appreciate you guys.
Likewise.
See you guys.
All right,
Have
bye,
a
chat.
great stream. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, man. And yeah, their links to, well, Geeks and Gamers and Ryan's channel are both in the description, so please give them a subscribe if you haven't already. I'm sure most people have. But yeah, like when we were talking about The Witcher there, it was so sad to see Henry Cavill, like a guy who obviously cares deeply about the character, the lore, and the world, laboring under the writing of people who just absolutely don't give a shit and seem to actively despise it, like based on what we've heard.
Feels a little unprecedented, doesn't it, that we had something like that happen, where a main draw actor is this passionate to the point where he's leaving the project because they won't be more fit. I mean, what was the quote? Like, they would even make fun of the source material and stuff, and it's just like, God, could you imagine that environment on set?
Yeah.
Like, we're so much better than the source when you're there for the source to be reimagined into another format, and you're like, oh.
The thing is, these people will never learn either. They'll like the fact that the show's not been a success. It'll be a total mystery to them, and they'll just write it off as like, well, fucking toxic fans just couldn't handle it.
It's the audience's fault,
smart.
definitely.
Always is.
But it's yeah, because if you could take it in isolation, you could say, well, Henry Cavill's leaving, and of course there is the interview where he's talking about how much he likes the lore. But taken in isolation, you would still be you would still be supposing that was the reason he left. But didn't that happen in the same week as you had who was it who used to be part of the Witcher writing team, who came out and said, yes, some of them really just hate the source material and they don't like it, and you get those two things in the same week. You sort of triangulate your way to the conclusion that actually that is the reason Henry Cavill left. I think that's why, like, his most passionately delivered lines in all of The Witcher was just when he goes fuck, because that's basically how he's feeling.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, well, there's that famous kind of anecdote about the death of Roach in season 2, I think, where like they wanted to turn it into some kind of meta joke about how he just keeps trading in horses and stuff, and Henry Cavill overruled them, and he was like, "Look, please, no, this isn't how you do it. This should be a genuinely like heartfelt scene. Let me rewrite it." And he fought for it, and basically you ended up with like probably the best dramatic scene of the entire show. And it was because of the fucking actor, not the writers, who are supposed to know how to do this stuff. And it's just, yeah, it pisses me off, because how many like writers out there would kill to be in their position, to be helming The Witcher, you know, to give that opportunity to like bring it to the big screen. And these ungrateful, arrogant arseholes are the ones who actually end up doing it. And they not only do they not have respect for the source material, but as we learn, they actively like mock it and despise it. Why do people like that get these opportunities? It's so fucking unfair.
And it goes back to that point you were making in your video earlier about updating for a modern audience. And the reason that never ever seems to work is because the modern audience in question is actually the writers. The writers are the people who've never had any exposure to the source material. They're the ones who've never been fans of the show. They're the ones who've never been fans of the comics or anything like that. They're the ones who are new to all of this. So they're updating it for a modern audience, which is just themselves. And all the people, as you mentioned, who you could have brought in, who genuinely have a passionate love for the source material, who would have done an infinitely better and more faithful job, are passed over in favor of people who assume, because they only know people who are very much like them and live in the same places they do and went to the same universities and have exactly the same life experience, that they are the new audience that is crying out to be serviced. And they're not. They're about 5 lonely, usually upper middle class women. And it's not a good recipe for creating pop culture.
Absolutely. No. I mean, I think, Chris, you could probably empathize with this when it comes to Doctor Who and stuff. Like, the people that they bring in just actively dislike their own source material.
Well, this has been going on for 7 years now, starting with Ghostbusters. Paul Feig, who subverted expectations before that word came into common usage. You know, there is... You can see it with Star Trek. You can see it with Doctor. You can basically see it with any franchise that's been destroyed. But I guess the show that I was formerly a fan of, Doctor Who, one of the reasons, well, there are many reasons why I'm not a fan anymore, but one of them was just the complete and utter contempt of the audience, of everyone that came before. And with Doctor Who, when and it is a good example, when Chris Chibnall came in as executive producer, this was back in 2017, he fired everybody that had been working on the show since it came back in 2005, brought in people that vaguely knew what they were doing. I think Star Trek is an even worse example of this. If you look at Star Trek Discovery, where not only did they not pay any attention to the source material, they didn't even understand the source material, which leads to plot holes, which leads to completely misunderstanding what a franchise is supposed to be about. With Star Trek, using that example again, it was supposed to be about Gene Roddenberry's vision of an optimistic future. Humanity had improved. We've gotten beyond all the petty bullshit we're dealing with now. And what happened? Well, by the time they got to Captain Picard, the Federation had turned into the United States of America, and Donald Trump was basically in charge. So and the problem is they don't want to create their own franchises because nobody's going to watch them. So we've said this over and over again. The easiest way of forcing your view on everyone else is to take control of an existing franchise and essentially destroy it. And we were talking about the MCU earlier, but that's the most recent version. For the longest time, And I think, Drink, I may even said this the first time we streamed together. It seemed like as every other franchise was devolving into shit, I remember saying repeatedly, well, somehow the MCU has avoided this, and they really did avoid that up until Captain Marvel. It was the same thing with, I used to say, the horror franchise, which is sort of where my main interest is now, or the horror genre. For the longest time, like, yeah, we're not seeing this in horror movies. Then Black Christmas comes out, and the remake of The Craft comes out, and it's just the same sequence of events over and over again. But we are seeing somewhat of a turnaround, and it's because we had to, and DC was the first victim to fall. Get woke, go broke. Well, they've basically gone broke, so now they have no choice.
The problem is it's going to take a lot longer for Disney to go broke just because they're so much more massive financially.
Maybe they'll buy Warner.
Yeah.
And there are ways they can dial it down as well, as opposed to getting rid of it completely, which it would be better, but I think it would still be a problem. But it has been a bit like sort of trying to avoid the Eye of Sauron. It's the reason that horror escaped where other franchises didn't is because nobody really saw at the time the cultural value of horror as a means for expressing their political ideals. Once everything else was taken, I think they sort of migrate to horror because, well, that's one of the genres we haven't captured yet, so now we're going to go and get it. But it's money will talk in the end, and eventually Warner is showing us that you'll be forced eventually to climb down to some degree, but whether or not you climb down completely is another question. I mean, Star Trek Discovery is a really interesting one because actually that basically kickstarted my channel growth in about February this year, I think it was, when I started. I was really annoyed because I'd watched a season of it just to see what it was about, and it pissed me off, so I thought, well, I'll have a go at this. But that was an interesting one because you say that they don't want to create their own franchises. I think the problem is they can't, because Star Trek Discovery takes you forward 3,000 years in season 3 to a period where they are effectively creating everything from scratch. So there's no lore derivation going on there. That is complete creative freedom. And if anything, it gets worse from that point on. It's not doing as much damage, but it's, in terms of narrative and storytelling, it's worse. And that, I think, just suggests that the reason they have to come in and take over established properties is because they don't actually have the creative ability to make their own one, even if they did want to.
Well, I think when you look at, say, the people that they brought in to do Rings of Power, sorry, I know we won't talk about this too much.
It's cool. I've accepted that I'm going to be doing this for the rest of 2 years. So as long as I'm finished with it by the time Mortar finishes with Game of Thrones, then I'll be good.
Well, I think you're fine then. But yeah, like when you look at the showrunners for that, like two guys who have essentially got nothing on their resume of any note. Like they helped out with some of the rewrites for Star Trek Into Darkness or Star Trek Beyond. I can't remember which one it was. I was going to say one of the terrible ones.
I think it was
but that's
Beyond.
pretty much all of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that's it.
Terrible.
And so like they don't have the experience or the talent to be able to create something from scratch. And suddenly they're put in charge of something of this magnitude. Like what else could it have done but fail? It's like it was set up to do that.
That is a staggering decision. It's, you're marketing this as the biggest budget TV show ever. You're putting $1 billion into it. It is self-evidently a huge reputational risk, and you put two people in charge of it who have no writing experience at all. And like my theory behind why they did that was it gives the studio much more creative control over the showrunners, because novice showrunners are more easily manipulable and persuadable, and studios which are very, very cautious about where things are going, usually to the detriment of where they are going, will prefer a pliant director and a pliant showrunner over one who is a maverick and who has a creative vision. But that's massively self-destructive, as Rings of Power has proven. I guess the only other thing is that it makes it much easier to throw them under the bus, as they now seem to be doing with all those rumours about them shaking up the creative team before season 2.
Yeah, but I mean, how much? I don't know, man. When you've got so much money at stake in such a high-profile property, like, how much more sense would it have made to have just said, right, we're going to get the best showrunners we can find for this? Like, they might have their own creative vision for it, but we'll make sure it lines up with what we do. We're going to vet them really well, and we're going to have confidence that they will produce something genuinely incredible. That just, I don't know. For me, as a complete novice, that just seems like such a better way of doing things.
Yeah, it is. I've been part of the reason my next Rings of Power video is taking so long is because I went to try and find some footage from the appendices for the Jackson films, and of course, once you start watching the appendices, you just sort of have to carry on, and that's multiple hours of content. So I lost some time doing that. But if you listen to the difference in outlook, and they actually, I think one of them described it. One of the creative team said that it was, it was the most complicated, the biggest low budget film ever made, said of the Fellowship of the Ring, I think it was. And the amount of care and detail and attention that goes into it, because they placed their money and their faith in the creative vision of a director who wanted to be faithful to source material. They thought, if we get a brilliant storyteller and a brilliant writing team and a brilliant sort of underrepresented studio or underknown studio who are nonetheless committed to small-scale, diligent work, then we will get something better than if we brought in then the biggest name director. Like, I don't think Steven Spielberg could have done with The Lord of the Rings what Peter Jackson did. And just comparing the approach and the meticulous, the meticulous approach of the creation of the Lord of the Rings films to Rings of Power, it's like, as I said earlier, you can't believe that this is done by the same species of people. It's almost as though it is not. It's a completely separate entity. One of them cares, one of them is passionate, and one of them is just, we've got the money, we've got all the money, throw the money at this problem, that problem will be solved. And to hell with writing, to hell with all the things that actually make art what it is.
I think the stakes were a little bit different too when you compare Rings of Power to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. Any other streaming service, a loss like this probably would have put them under, although this being Amazon, they own everything. The situation with Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, it was put out by New Line Cinema, which prior to that were primarily known for horror movies, most notably Nightmare on Elm Street, that series. New Line Cinema staked their entire existence on that trilogy of films. If they would have flopped, even if they would have just slightly more than broken even, it would have finished off the studio. So with Peter Jackson, you get an idea that, there was the passion behind this, but there was also the idea that this has to work or we're done. With Amazon, I only watched, I think, half of the first episode. I couldn't stomach any more after that. But with
you lucky person.
Yeah, well, that's the great thing of not doing this anymore. I no longer have to watch stuff that I hate. But I'm actually dumbfounded. Like, even though you're Amazon, you have money to burn because you own everything. They even own the infrastructure that every other streaming service exists on. But still, how could you screw this up this badly? Now, I haven't watched anything past halfway through the first episode. I've just watched other people's videos, and I've seen clips online, and Jesus Christ, it's like it was made by a sixth grader.
I think we established, Mulder, on EFAP that the first half of the first episode is probably the best it got.
So it gets worse. Okay, that's
it gets so bad, dude. Episode 6 was like the worst, and then the finale was pretty bad too. It's kind of hard to say which is the worst, but I'm sorry, that volcano going off, that might be the event of this show that was just the stupidest bullshit.
Oh my god.
I mean, you didn't want an origin story from Mount Doom. What is wrong with you volcano bigot?
It makes Lord of the Rings so much better when you see that mountain. You're like, oh, that's the sweaty old man mountain that he made. I remember. Yeah.
I still remember the songs they sing of Waldrig.
I am so happy that House of the Dragon and Rings of Power came out pretty much at the same time, because it seemed like suicide at the time for House of the Dragon, like it's going to get crushed by this like franchise juggernaut. But it gave you such a great point of comparison. Like, this is what happens when you have good, smart, intelligent writing by adults. This is what happens when you let kindergartners write your movie or your TV show. Sorry. And like see the results. One is just a cavalcade of nonsense that's conceived by idiots. The other one is like an actually well-structured story with good, relatable, interesting, multi-layered characters. It's great. I love the fact that they're right there next to each other for comparison.
Well, you look at who's heading this up too. You have whoever the hell was playing Galadriel versus Matt Smith, who was probably the best actor to ever portray the main role on that show I used to like. So and it is kind of ironic because we would have guessed it would have been the opposite situation after season 8 of Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings. We would have figured that Lord of the Rings would have been the success story, and Game of Thrones would have continued to shit itself, but ironically, it wasn't. We're in the exact opposite situation. But even
it's reputational like crossover, ships passing in the night, because Game of Thrones ends on an incredibly sour note and is completely, well, not completely, but largely redeemed by the end of House of the Dragon. And The Lord of the Rings is still, and at the point Rings of Power started, was and remained one of the best loved cultural properties ever to have been put to screen.
Yeah.
And just so it's not just that they're useful artistically to compare, but the results of that in terms of reputation, to see these things just shoot past each other on the graph, it's really astounding stuff. But the question of stakes that Cultivated Media you mentioned a little while ago was, I thought, an interesting one, because I think you're right in that stakes make it, a studio will perhaps be more careful with a product, but obviously will be more careful with a product if the future of that studio depends on the success of product. But I'm sure I remember someone at Amazon saying that this will determine the future of our streaming service. Now, fair enough, that's not the company as a whole, but that is the streaming service which they really wanted to make a staple part of their newest offering. So how does that square? Because surely they would still have had a huge amount of investment, not just monetary, but reputational, in the success of that show.
I don't think the reputation is going to improve, but out of all the streaming services, the only reason, Amazon Prime is by far the worst, and I include Netflix in that.
Really, you think that Prime's the worst? I obviously have no way of figuring out which is the worst, to be honest with you. Just Netflix's reputation is that it's like 99% trash.
It's most of it is. Although when I look at Prime, I can't think of any show in the past 2 or 3 years. People keep telling me to watch The Boys, which I will at some point. Whereas at least Amazon, on Netflix, there's the occasional show that I'll watch. But I at Amazon, I think people have already been fired over this.
I think with Prime's a difficult one, because it's like what you're really paying for is like the TV shows and stuff, but you're also getting the Prime service with Amazon.
That's the only reason I have it, Prime shipping.
That's that's why people get it. And it's like, well, also the bonus thing, well, I get to watch TV shows as well that aren't available anywhere else.
I think HBO Max is really good out of the lot for quality ratio. As for worst, like I haven't even seen what Apple and Hulu and the other ones have.
See, we get that all on one streaming service lumped together in Canada. We have this god-awful service called Crave, which is streaming at 720 if you're lucky. So that's where Paramount Plus, HBO, Showtime, pretty much anything that isn't Crave, Netflix, or Disney Plus gets lumped on. But at least with Netflix, they will occasionally have that show. That, like, they'll have their Squid Games. They'll have Stranger Things Season 4. They'll have Dahmer, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. I can't think of any equivalent on Amazon. Like, even if you look at Disney, I guess, well, they do have the Star Wars and MCU franchises. But really, can you name one massive show that's had almost universal appeal that's been on Amazon Prime? She-Hulk was
Disney again.
Although She-Hulk was the be-all and end-all of awesomeness. It's the
Prime,
best comedy I've ever seen.
Amazon has The Boys, doesn't it? And The Expanse, which it picked up. And I know I've not seen all of The Expanse, but I gather that's quite popular. I don't know if it's still as well received as when it started. And it wasn't Amazon when it did start. But The Boys and The Expanse are the two that sort of come most readily to mind for Amazon.
I think The Boys is probably the biggest. Like, The Expanse is kind of more a cult following.
It's I think The Expanse was better at the beginning. I haven't watched the most recent season, but I know there was a quality drop.
Grand Tour is on Prime.
And Clarkson's Farm, of course.
I recommend people check that out. It's better than you think.
It's weirdly
everyone's
compelling.
dying in chat for you to say Reacher and Terminal List Drinker. They're all
so both of those pretty serviceable. Not amazing, but pretty decent shows in their own right. But they're not like draws. I don't think they're not going to make people sign up for.
Kind of funny, because it's like Netflix. What does that have? And it's like Stranger Things. It's like, yeah, sort of. Like, it depends, really, what era we're looking at.
It's got like 1 billion documentaries and shows that you'll never watch. Like, it's.
See, I'm weird. I actually like Netflix's documentaries, but I don't know. I've got a sick mind. I like all this true crime stuff. So those are probably the reason, because Netflix is by far the most expensive. I think those documentaries are the only reason I haven't gotten rid of Netflix yet. Because whenever I plan on canceling Netflix, and there's always that one thing that I want to check out. Prime, the last time I actually logged on to the streaming service, it had been so long since I'd even powered it up. I had to update it and then log back in. I think it'd been at least 6 months. And the other issue that I had with Prime is the only shows that I used to watch on Prime were older legacy network shows from decades ago. And the most annoying thing about Prime is if you add something to your watch list on Netflix, if it goes away, you can't see it anymore. Prime, it stays in there. So I went through it recently, and I'm like, literally nothing that I've saved in my watch list is still available on the streaming service. There's nothing. But again, it's Amazon, so they won't go under, kind of like Disney Plus. But if Netflix, after the past few years they've had, especially this past year, if they would have had something like the Lord of Rings fiasco or Rings of Power, that would have finished them off.
Netflix is the one which is ultimately going to be on the most shaky ground because Amazon has got, well, the entire Amazon service backing it up. So like that's the tidal wave of money coming in. So they're fine. Disney Plus has got the theme parks, which, you know, obviously generates enormous revenue for them. So they have that. But Netflix doesn't have anything. It's got to stand on its own content.
Part of the model that I find insane is that they had the COVID years, which would have spiked everything for streaming stuff, and then they were like, and the following years we have to get the same and more, and it's like, you won't. You're just not. It's not going to happen.
That was the premise on which it was sold to investors was essentially a pyramid scheme model. It was, you invest in Netflix because look at the growth we just had. We'll always have that. There'll be more. And the more of you invest, the more viewers we'll get and the more subscriptions we will rake in. And then that inevitably doesn't happen. Even one quarter where its subscriber numbers fall short of expectations and people are fleeing it in terms of investment carries an enormous amount of debt as a company. And that is obviously for legal reasons we can't say Netflix is a pyramid scheme, but that's a scheme, pyramid scheme style model. This promise of permanently better growth and greater investment. The more you invest, the better the growth and the better your returns. And apparently without very much regard to what content you're putting out, which you would have thought was the fundamental point of a streaming service.
Well, I think what's going to happen now is you're going to see a kind of a homogenization of streaming services over the next few years. You know, these smaller ones like Paramount Plus are just going to get swallowed up by other bigger companies. And I don't know, you're probably going to end up with two maybe that are going to be dominating the entire market. And that's what everyone's trying to be. They're trying to be one of those two. And maybe that's why you're seeing such a crazy amount of content getting pumped out by Marvel and Lucasfilm and stuff just to try and keep
a war
up. Just
that we don't even know about yet.
It's just like, yeah, just make more stuff. Just keep people constantly engaged. Just keep them on the platform as long as possible, like so that we can outlast the competition. And eventually someone will fold and we're going to hoover up all their subscribers and we will become, if not the monopoly, then at least like one of the big two that's left.
And it's about perpetual income as well, in that the really interesting thing to know about Rings of Power would be how many people subscribed to Amazon Prime on the back of Rings of Power and stayed subscribed to it, say 6 months later, because the show could be an absolute bomb. But if it's got a large number of people who subscribed and have stayed for other reasons, then it will have done its job in the long run, because that's guaranteed you a stable amount of income, guaranteed, which you can then sell to investors as, look, this is our guaranteed return. It can only get better from here. And that's sort of what they did, I think, with why Netflix was so keen to have Star Trek Discovery when that started, before the reputation of Star Trek tanked, was that's a known IP, so we'll have that. It's why Paramount was so keen to bring it exclusively onto their platform from Netflix, even before their platform was available internationally. I sort of, my theory is that that's sort of one of the really important reasons why the quality of these IPs is dropping so much, is that actually the quality of the IP doesn't matter. It's the name recognition, the brand value, and how many subscribers that brings in to use your other services. And the quality of the story doesn't matter. If this was network TV and you got ratings like Star Trek Discovery or Rings of Power, you would be in serious trouble. But it's a subscription model. You're not going to have the same relationship with your audience. You don't have to be as responsive to ratings as you would with a traditional model. That might change with Netflix because Netflix is sort of paradoxically trying to emulate all the worst features of cable TV because its existing model has failed, so it's going back to advertising and all the rest of that, which might be a signal that it's on the way out, because why would you pay to see adverts when you can see adverts for free on cable? Or, well, not all cable, but some. But yeah, that massive disconnect between quality of art and subscribers that you get is just, it's really killing writing, I think, in an important way.
I think the biggest mistake that Netflix made, and could be their undoing in the end, is when Netflix streaming took off before House of Cards, which I think that was, 2013, which was their first original series. What drew everybody to Netflix in the first place was, all these TV shows, sitcoms, movies, whatever that you grew up with on the streaming service. And there was a time that everything was on Netflix. And I think if I had to say, or if I was running Netflix, rather than dumping millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into really garbage content that nobody wanted to watch, like how many one-season abandoned wonders are there on that streaming service, I think they should have put their attention towards purchasing one of the existing entertainment companies, because we know, obviously, Fox was up for purchase because Disney bought them out. It was rumored for years, and I'm pretty sure they could have bought Viacom CBS because they were close to bankruptcy, and that had been rumored a few years ago. I think they should have focused on originals with quality content. But say if they, if they bought Viacom, like the parent company, which at that point CBS and Paramount were separate but still under the same parent company. If they would have done that, then they would have had the Star Trek IP. They would have had decades of TV shows owned by CBS, the Paramount library that Paramount actually still owns. And I think the fact that they've missed out on that, now they're in so much debt, it's completely out of question. But I think that's where Netflix made the mistake. And I think the only way they'll survive is if they merge with another company, or if somebody just buys Netflix outright, keeps the shows that, the 5% that people actually watch, and dumps the rest.
No, that's I'm inclined to agree on that one, actually.
Curious future ahead of us for all these services. They've expanded out. It's kind of crazy. And no one can even keep track of how many there are. And there are some problems of, like, for example, my parents are like, House of Dragons good? And I was like, yeah, you should see it. And they're like, oh, okay, how do we see it? Because they have Netflix. And I was like, oh, it's not on that. And they were like, oh, is it the Disney one? And I was like, no, it's HBO Max. And they're like, how do we get that? And I was like, I'm not sure.
There was one more thing I was going to tackle just before we did a few super chats. It was obviously Henry Cavill. We were talking about him moving over to leave The Witcher and get back to doing Superman again. So most of us were generally pretty happy about that. I feel like it's a pretty worthwhile change, but not everyone, as it turns out. Frosk, better known as the person who fucking torpedoed G4 TV, decided that she was going to weigh in on this. So yeah, what was it she said on Twitter here? I'm going to see if I can just bring it up briefly. Yeah. So, yeah, she decided Henry Cavill said some very questionable things around Me Too and dated a 19-year-old as a 30+. Oh, okay. That's pretty much Leonardo DiCaprio's MO. Seeing people throw themselves at his feet in The Witcher is weird. The show is whatever at best. And I just love the fact that she got fucking destroyed by Gary. He just posted up the Frosk video from Friday Night Size. I'm gonna watch it again, actually. Yeah, I'll put that on mute. But that was glorious. But yeah, I just think it's funny, like the complete lack of self-awareness there.
What were the questionable things he said about Me Too? Why do I believe that it's more likely he said normal things?
This is what I was going to say, and I'm going kind of by memory here, but I remember him doing interviews about this, and he was like, "Look, I think it's fine to raise awareness of this stuff, but it also runs the risk of going too far, and just like you can't even meet people for fear of unfounded accusations being leveled against you, especially if you're a public figure." And I think he also said things around like the idea of like courtship and romance, and it's like, you know, women kind of like to be pursued a little bit in terms
Sounds
of
pretty
like
questionable, bro.
yeah, like going on dates and stuff. They kind of like the guy to make the first move generally, and like they generally want the men to be like a little bit assertive and kind of do that stuff. And wow, you can predict the reaction that came from social media. You know, he must be murdered. Clearly,
There was one. I mean, Chris Pratt there was a Twitter campaign to cancel Chris Pratt for not saying stuff. That he didn't come out at all and say, I can't. Was it Me Too or was it? It might be Me Too or some gay rights thing. But Chris Pratt just didn't say anything, and all his Marvel co-stars by and large did. And so Twitter said, well, he's not saying anything. Also, he goes to church occasionally, so he must be a fascist. You must cancel him now. And to their credit, his co-stars came out and said, no, he's a really lovely guy. But you can't escape that sort of Twitter cancel mob, and it's sort of baiting the trap as well. I remember when is it Mike Pence, when he was vice president, said, well, of course, I will never be alone in a room with a woman who's not my wife. And so Twitter said, ha ha ha, what a weirdo. But you know what would happen if he wasn't alone in a room with a woman who wasn't his wife? They'd say, well, something dodgy happened there, so you must cancel him. You can't win in that situation.
I think that was I remember that one actually, because yeah, people interpret it as like, oh my god, you're such a beast that you can't control yourself around women. And he's like, no, I'm doing this because I don't want to get accused of something that I didn't do. And so it's literally impossible to Me Too that guy, because it's like he's always got witnesses to back him up. And it's like you can almost feel the rage amongst people. It's like, oh, we can't get him, son of a bitch. You know, like that seems to be the mentality of like we have to be able to like almost have a gun to the head of every sort of public figure that we can just take out whenever we want to if they say something that we don't like. And when they find out they can't do it, it's like pure fury. And yeah, so with Henry, as far as I understand it, he was just pointing out that there's some potential flaws there, some potential for being abused, you know, the whole system of that. And also maybe just having slightly like naive, old-fashioned views on what romance and courtship is. And for that, like, yeah, Frosk is unwilling to tolerate him apparently. And I just thought, well, who's living the better life right now? Who's probably happier as a person, and who's better liked? I wonder, out of the two of them.
Well, one of them has a job.
That's true, yeah.
And
But
people are happy.
you know,
with one
Henry
another.
Cavill seems to be pretty universally liked amongst the fan bases and stuff. You know, he generally comes across as a pretty nice guy.
Drink it. The man builds his own PC and likes Warhammer. Like it's done.
Exactly.
Already 10 billion points.
Whereas Frosk seems to be, well, I think Henry Cavill's CGI lips from Justice League have got more charm and likability than Frosk, and are probably more popular as well. So
Yeah, only one of them has played an instrumental role in tanking an entire company recently, and it wasn't Henry Cavill.
Yeah.
Actually, if you put Frosk in charge of Game of Thrones Season 2, you could orchestrate the heat death of the universe just on sort of that complete meeting of death.
I would say so. I mean, it's just, yeah, I think if I was her, and considering everything that had happened over the past month or so, I would be laying low and just not really giving my opinions on anything, and just probably stay off social media. You know, you really want to let that thing die down, considering everything that's happened, and it's like, no, can't do it. I have to be constantly, you know, poking the bear. And I guess that's what happens. But, you know, I'm sure someone will take her on. I'm pretty sure McDonald's are hiring.
Well, I think G4 was such a bad idea to begin with because it was redundant. And then even before the incident, look at the views they were getting. I'm like, my God, I thought my channel was doing bad near the end. No, they had videos that couldn't even get 2,000 views. And how many people did they have making six-figure salaries? I guess they were on cable where like five people might watch them.
It was scary, like when I saw the reports on this, because it was like they started making these announcements of like redundancies, and it was like 30 people have been let go, and I thought, how the fuck have you got 30 people working for you? What do they do?
Yeah.
They write scripts.
I mean,
Kind of nuts, because if you had 30 people and you know, look, Drinker, I'm being nice, okay? If you had 30 people at Drinker's level working for you, they probably would be fine. They probably have like shit tons of people editing and reviewing and stuff. It's like, what were all of them doing? Like, what were they up to? Write articles together? like, because you know the whole like there's like that format for creation or whatever, where they have like someone plays the game, someone writes the scripts, someone else reads them or whatever, and I was just like, God, what a disjointed mess.
That's so
Like-
yeah, it's so shit. Like imagine a crazy world where you play something like for a decent length of time to form a good opinion of it. You sit down for a day or two to write a script, and then you perform it. And then maybe you could get someone to edit it for you, and that's it. Like, so what you see on screen is your work, it's your opinions.
Yeah, 'cause
Now
I
it's
can't.
just
I wouldn't be able to handle that, man. If someone said like, "Oh, I really liked your review of BioShock," and I'm like, "Yeah, it seems like a good game," I haven't played it. Like, okay, that's strange, but all right.
Yeah, I mean, Frosk admitted that herself. It's like what she ultimately ends up presenting. It's usually not her own opinions. It's just someone else wrote it, and she's just there to be an actor essentially. Like,
And
what's
the
point?
one time she gave her own opinion, we saw what happened. So probably for the
Look
best.
what happens.
It's like Frost, Han, maybe don't give your own opinion.
I'd love to know, like, because I assume this was agreed in advance. Like they discussed it and they said, right, we're going to do this segment where Frost gets to air her thoughts on
Right.
sexism in gaming. Did they genuinely think the audience was just going to lap it up and be like, yes, say it, Frosk. You
think
really hit the
so.
nail on the head. Please insult us more. Or yeah.
It's unclear if you can tell a lot of them out of fear will be like, yeah, and then retrospectively like, oh fuck, that was cringe, wasn't it?
I mean, it's the golden rule, isn't it? Like when you're doing a live stream, like we're doing right now, you're not well advised to start laying into your own chat and start insulting them and calling them assholes.
No,
Because that's probably not going to go down too well. And if you keep doing that on a consistent basis, you're not going to have a chat anymore. And
well,
I
yeah,
don't know
'cause
why
they're
anyone would
there,
think
right? They'll
otherwise.
be like, fuck this, I'm gonna go find someone who doesn't hate me.
Yeah.
And it's not
I mean,
even
it's
the chat
it's
in the
not
moment.
rocket
It's like
science.
this is a long-standing audience, and it's not exactly as though people are unaware of the sort of the socio-political issues around gamers. That's been a thing for a while. You can't not know what your audience is going to say when you tell them that they're all misogynist shitbags. You must have known that was coming. But some studios and films and TV shows will inadvertently betray the fact that they think that their fans are scum. But very rarely do you see someone overtly do that live on air to their face and then somehow expect that people will continue to like and watch them. If you don't like what I say, don't watch me, she said. And it's like, okay, well, what? You are inviting half your audience to leave.
It's funny because I initially felt sorry for Adam Sessler, like one of the founders of G4, but then
You
when
looked
I
at his
learned about-
Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. When I learned more about what his views are, I thought, nah, fuck you, you piece of shit. Like, you deserve everything that's coming to you. That genuinely
He's one of the
horrible
most
human
unhinged
beings.
people I've seen. I didn't even realize. Like, a friend of mine was like, "Have you seen what he tweets?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm sure it's chill." And I was like, "Oh."
Yeah. It's like, well, it's a great example of like these people got what was coming to them. Like, and I don't have any sympathy for them, but I do have sympathy for the people behind the scenes who were just doing a job. They probably didn't believe any of that crap. They were just there to, it's exciting. We're working for G4 TV again, and
Not
be
for
part of
long.
Something kind of cool. Yeah, exactly. And
No.
then it's all taken away, and it's like because of these narcissistic idiots who just felt like they had to insult their own audience. Yeah, that's the way it
sad, though.
goes.
You ask the question, there's 30 employees, what are they all doing? If you accept a job where your principal role is just to clap at whatever Frosk says, then you should probably know that that's not a job for the future.
I think corporate bloat is just like it's an inevitability with companies like this, particularly when they hire people like Frosk. It's just like they start inventing jobs for people because they can't turn them down. And yeah, I'm sure Twitter's the same. That's why Musk is going to come in and probably fire about half the workforce. Because a lot of these people will just be doing pointless tasks that don't need to be done. And particularly when I see those day in the life of a Twitter employee videos, it's like, yeah, you're not adding much to that company, I don't think, but you're eating up a lot of resources.
That was bad timing. The most recent one.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like that job. I think it was Gundam's got a whole series on them. It's like you show
they
up to
have
work,
wine
you
on
have
tap.
your
I'd like it.
wine on tap, you got your muffin, you got like your gourmet lunch. None of them do any actual work. I'm like, could I have that job, please?
Yeah, because I'm sure we've all worked in like corporate environments to some degree at some point in our lives, and like know, when you get scheduled in for meetings, 90% of the meetings that you go to are pretty pointless, and you kind of just check out and like look at your phone or whatever while you're there. Yeah, that's what they seem to do all day long. It's where it's like we got another meeting about a meeting that we're going to be planning a meeting for. And just doing stuff like that, just
I think part of it's probably once you complete a meeting, it's like we're working. You're like, yeah, I guess so. Like nothing's been made, but we had a meeting.
Yeah, we discussed things.
I quit my day job. Was it last week or the week before? So I was in that environment up until a week and a half ago. And that thing where they say, well, now we want you to start coming into the office again once a week. It's okay, why? So, well, we need to have meetings. You mean those meetings we've been doing on Google Meet for the last 2 years? Yeah, but we need to do this in person. What do you want me to do after that? Well, just work. So you want me to spend my own money getting a train into a horrible city to sit in a sterile office where I have to pay for coffee to do exactly the same job I've been doing for 2 years from the comfort of my own bedroom? Yeah. Well, no, go away. That's entirely unnecessary. Why are they doing that? Well, they've paid for a very fancy new office and they think they need to make use of it somehow. So it sort of becomes self-fulfilling. You've placed this huge amount of capital down on the formation of company or the buying of real estate, and you haven't been able to use it for 2 years. Now you've still got it, though. It's a going concern. You have to make some kind of justified use for it. So you bring people in to do stuff that you've just found out they can do more efficiently from home. Corporate bloat is the enemy of any sensible business. It does seem to come to a large number of media companies in particular, though. I mean, I worked for one of those, and G4 is a very, very good example of that. I don't quite know why that is. I mean, there's been a lot of silly money thrown around, and I think perhaps the sort of prospectus selling to investors, again, like Netflix, you've had 2 years of pandemic where usership has peaked. We can carry that on and grow that in the future, whereas now it turns out you can't. Maybe that's had something to do with it. The sort of the viewership rates have been skewed by the pandemic. But then again, it happens in other industries as well where that can't be the case. So I'm not really sure why that happens. It just seems to be an inevitability.
I think I remember reading once that like the average worker works to about 50% of their actual capacity most times. And so that's part of the reason. Like nobody's really giving it 100%, and so you have to get lots of people in because they're all just half-assing it. I remember one of my own managers once said to me, I'm pretty much aware that no work gets done before 10 a.m. or after about 3 p.m. in the afternoon because everyone just fucks around when they get into the office and they've got set up and they want to get coffee and all that stuff. So, like, for that first hour, nothing gets done. And then by the time you get to about mid-afternoon, everyone hits that slump. And, like, they might finish something. They can't really be bothered starting a new piece of work, so they'll just leave it and start it tomorrow. And so you've only got that fairly small window during the day. And take lunch out the equation as well, where things actually get done. And it's the nature of it. And I think this is probably what you'll recognise now that you've left your job and now you're doing YouTube full-time. You're your own boss now, and you probably end up working way harder than you ever did in a corporate environment because, one, you actually care about what you're doing, and two, there's no one else that's going to pick up the slack. Like, it's literally just you that's required to get everything done now.
Yeah.
It's rewarding, but it means you put in a lot more time probably than you did before.
Yeah, also I get to produce content that people actually watch, which is an improvement on my last media company. So, yeah, that's with all respect to my last media company, who were very lovely people. But no, it's no. I can chart the exact moment I chose. I thought this has got to be it. That was the first time I was on EFAP, which was the 12-hour one. I had to go into the office that morning. Got back at 7 in the evening, and I think I was on open bar at 9 till 1.
Jesus.
So that was that. In between that, when I was at the office at my desk, thinking I could be at home sleeping. That was when I thought, no, I'm done with the corporate world now. This is it. I can't survive this much longer.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, dude. I remember trying to make videos while having a full-time job was absolutely insane.
Yep.
I remember being in work, being in a meeting for it was an IT thing, and just thinking about Soma, Amnesia, Westworld. I was just like,
Start writing scripts.
Yeah, that's the thing. And then there's some guy who's just like, "So what do you think about that?" I'm like, "Huh? Oh, yes, yeah."
Well, the kind of degree of like corporate blow and the lack of oversight in my job was that bad that I've written at least 2 novels while I was at my desk at work that got published, which was great, and countless scripts for videos before I actually left and became a full-time YouTuber. Same deal. I was just like, people thought I was being super productive because I was just there hammering away at the keyboard. They couldn't quite see what I was typing, and so that's what I was able to do. And that, more than anything, just clued me in. Like, what I'm doing here is kind of pointless anyway. Like, even if I didn't want to leave, like, that's the indication that, you know, I can just be doing something completely unrelated to my job for hours each day, and no one gives a shit. Cool. Well, I'll just go then. Like, I don't need this.
Yeah, I always found the downside because it's been, I think, about 3.5 years. Because I at one point I did YouTube full time, and I was getting fairly decent views back then. But one of the things that would really piss me off, it's like, okay, this is my job. I need to make enough to cover my rent, mortgage, whatever, car payments. And the thing that would piss me off is, you know, okay, I put all this work into a video. I don't know. It's been a while since I've uploaded now. I don't know how bad it is now, but there'd be nothing like putting 12 hours into making a video, upload, publish, yellow $sign. And then I don't know if you guys remember the Vox Adpocalypse that was in. That was when I stopped being a full-time YouTuber because I pissed off somebody. I think it was at Disney with the Captain Marvel video, but I pissed somebody off. And at that point, I'm like, well, I enjoy doing this, but literally I'm going to be living in a cardboard box if I keep doing it. So there are good sides, and there are bad sides, which when I finally go back, I don't think I would do it full time again. And I'm terrible at streaming, especially when I'm off the cuff. But I think the idea of doing videos when I want to do them or when I feel like them, there's an advantage to that too. Because there's always, when you're doing it full time, you have, okay, something happened. Okay, Jodie Whittaker said something idiotic today. I have to make a video. I don't want to make a video about this. So I've done both, but I do miss the full time YouTubing where it's, you know, I can do what I want. And if I fail, I guess I can blame me or the $sign.
I don't have much difference. Back in the day job, I had an editor every day looking over the scripts or, well, my articles that I was writing, and now I have some poor drone employed by Amazon manually checking my Rings of Power videos, so there's not much difference.
I'm great. I'm really enjoying the chat as well. Like, a lot of advice coming our way. Like, if you always look slightly annoyed, people assume that you're working hard. It's very true, actually. Yeah, you're all bad employees. That is very true. I fully admit to that.
Yeah.
But that, you know, this is what happens, I suppose. Like, you kind of give the minimum effort to whatever job that you're in and try and pursue something that you're genuinely passionate about and enjoy. And with luck, that's going to take off, and that's going to allow you to do that instead. But, you know, we're obviously very lucky here that we were able to make a go of it, and that's become our living. But, you know, a lot of people don't catch that break. So there's an element of luck there. But, yeah, I guess you get to enjoy it if it does happen.
I am jealous that you could do the novels while at work, though. I made the mistake of starting mine on a typewriter that I got for my birthday, and I couldn't realistically lug a typewriter. That might have been noticed, but...
yeah, it was
it's
just
my weird typewriter. What?
yeah. For me, it was just a lot of my job was copy editing anyway. So like you were generally working in Word documents, no matter what. It was just like you kind of had to keep an eye out in case someone came too close, so you could switch over. But yeah, it was lucky, I suppose, that I was in that position. But hey, you know, we have a bunch of super chats. If we got a little bit of time, we could maybe do a few before we finish up the stream.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Alrighty. Let me see if I can get through these. JS Pena says, "Happy anniversary to Kojira. Long live the king." Yeah, is it King Kong Day right today?
Is it King
the
Kong
anniversary
Day?
of no King Kong, fucking Godzilla. Apologies.
Yeah, I think King Kong should have a day too.
Yeah, he should. Yeah, I think it's like what, the 60th anniversary, something like that today.
Good for Godzilla though. He's an old boy.
Yeah, Also from him says, I could be wrong, but I think you looked up the wrong actress I recommended for this short film. Try searching for Tatiana Neva. All right, give me 1 second and I will. This is, for the Ryan Drake short film that we're doing. Someone was recommending an actress, so let's see what they got. Tatiana Neva. She looks like... Oh, hello. Gentlemen, I might need to go offline for a few minutes. Yeah. I don't know if she's done cosplay as well, because there seems to be pictures of her as like Wonder Woman or something, but damn, yeah. Can I... Let's see if I can share this. Just to give everyone a flavor, you know. Alright. And share screen. So, yeah. Yeah, there seems to be pictures of her as Wonder Woman for some reason. She does look pretty hot, not gonna lie. Yeah, that could do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, so I'll save that for later. But yeah, that is a pretty good recommendation, sir. Thank you. Next one is Chucksenhausen, who says, I've been waiting for the happy hour with Jeremy and Tom, but can't wait any longer to ask, how amazing was that sword fight between Chosen and Terry from Cobra Kai? The acting was intense, the movement and choreography was top notch, and you felt like Chosen might not make it out alive. Talk about brilliant. I do pray that Drinker, the happy hour for Cobra Kai can happen one day, even if it's on a Sunday during the catch-up for Super Chats. It would be worth it. To just get the passionate joy for this show out there, raw and unprotected, just how Tatiana likes it. And I know Jeremy and Dark Hour agrees too. Yeah, man, I did love that sword fight, actually. That was one of the times I was genuinely on the edge of my seat with that show, because it felt like it was at that point where characters could actually get killed off, so all good stuff. And yeah, I would love to do that stream talking about it for a little bit.
Has it got Shad's seal of approval as a sword fight?
I would say, well, I don't know actually, Mauler, you might know better than I do how he feels about the sword fighting there.
I haven't talked to because I'm a sinner. I haven't seen any of Cobra Kai. I should be shocked, presumably.
I've watched the first 4 episodes. I keep meaning to watch the rest. I've been at the first 4 episodes for I think 3 years.
You guys, honestly, what am I going to do with you? I can't.
Hey, you invited us, all right?
I can't. I didn't invite you. You're my co-host.
That counts as an invite.
Well, kind of, yeah. Yeah, give it a go. Honestly, like I don't think you'll regret it. I think you'll get
to one up on the sin count. I'm not sure I've actually ever seen Karate Kid either. That's what it's based off, right?
You don't need to see it. I mean, it'll give you a bit of context, but you could probably work with what you see in the show anyway. Like, if you're vaguely aware of the storyline for Karate Kid, that's probably enough for you.
Okay.
You'd be alright, I would think. Kevin O'Neill says, Cavill's career has been frustrating to watch. The man is a complete package of looks, brawn, charisma, and real passion for the source material, and these writers keep wasting him on expensive garbage.
Yep.
That is all true.
Archetypally, he could have dominated so many different roles by now. Famous roles, too. Everyone was like, where was his James Bond? It's like, he's not going to have a chance to play James Bond. It's going to be too late by the time they realize it's probably a good decision.
The next one, I'm going to have to run through Google Translate, actually, so bear with me 1 second, because I think it's come through in Polish or something. Okay, so... Nope. Okay. Yeah, so it says... Hey Drinker, just because I'm curious, how tall are you? I don't know why I had to come through. I had to like translate that, but yeah. So I am 6'2". That is my height. I don't know. I can't really embezzle that or anything, or sorry, embellish it with anything else. That's my height. Unhinged says moist. Well, aren't we all? I mean, it's that kind of night. It's open bar. Waylon Bucephus says, I swear a pistol seems more inviting than Wakanda. I'm with you on that one. Grimnack28 says, Hail, have you guys seen the YouTube series VGHS? I remember watching it in high school. Really cheesy, but damn, the character work in season 3 is 100 times better than anything that's come out of the mainstream in recent years. So, VGHS. I've not seen it.
Not heard of it. I'll have to look it up.
No, not familiar.
Kevin O'Neill. Drinker, I recently learned that you like retro synthwave. You should check out Gunship. They're 2 albums in, and I just began work on their third. Never knew I liked the genre till I heard them. Nice. All right, I'll keep that in mind. Leon Bicephus. My favorite part of Rings of Power was when Galadriel stole a kid's lunch money and said, "There is a tempest in me," before Roadhouse kicking a 6-year-old. Anyway, so I hear that you're all misogynist now. Does the drinker recommend that we adapt this position as well? Anyways, I'm going to find a hole to be my secretary. What?
Oh my.
Yeah, the drinker recommends that you all become misogynists. I think it's the way to go, I guess.
It is a badge of honor these days.
It seems to be, yeah. Grimnack says, who are the bravest hobbits in all of the Shire? Scotty and Pippin? Honor them. Mauler, have you played Dragon's Dogma? If so, what are your thoughts?
Did you say
have not.
Scotty and Pippin?
Yeah.
Yes.
Which
Is there's a hobbit called Scotty?
I never know if
it's a
is it a-
basketball thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but
Oh.
is it more common outside of, because the only thing I remember it happening on, like, other than just the reference in and of itself, was we had a guest on one of our EFAB streams who unironically referred to them as like, and, you know, I'm a big fan of Scotty and Pippin, and we were all just laughing, and they were like, what? Like,
Dragon's Dogma, what's your thoughts?
I haven't played it. I can't say anything, I'm afraid.
Okay. Bryce Lynch says, what are your thoughts on Bones and All, book and movie which frighteningly paints deliberately murderous cannibals as some oppressed minority that is misunderstood by society? The sort of blank silence suggests that none of us have seen
I'm
this.
building up a long list of things I apparently need to check out, but I've
Yeah.
not heard of that either.
It's only going to get worse the more like infamous you become on YouTube. You will have a very long list of things that people want you to watch and review. Night King 1 says, I know you hate Daniel Craig, everything after his first outing sucked, but Casino Royale is the most accurate representation of Bond other than on Her Majesty's Secret Service. He is Jason Bourne, he is an assassin in the books. Yeah, I could kind of go with that. Like,
But Bond on screen is never supposed to be Bond in books. They are very, very different characters. Even the early Bond films, the Bond on screen is very different from Bond in books.
I think Timothy Dalton probably came closest because apparently he was a massive fan of the books and he like constantly referenced them when he was doing his movies. So I think he was probably closest to Bond, like super serious and like laser focused and all that. Yeah, I don't know, man. Maybe it's just Daniel Craig's acting style. Maybe it's just his facial expressions. He always just gives off this air of like, I don't want to be doing this. I'm bored. I'm tired. I just want to be left alone.
Not helped by the fact that that's exactly what he said in several interviews as well. So
yeah,
could be forgiven
exactly.
for taking that impression. But I know it's like the Bond on screen to me has always been slightly silly, slightly campy, and joyous of the fact. And I think turning him into, he might be more Jason Bourne in the books. I don't know. But I think turning Bond on screen into Jason Bourne when you already have Jason Bourne is a loss of an entire genre of slightly campy, old-style English spy action, and to be regretted for that.
I very much.
Favorite era, Little Platoon?
I quite like the Roger Moore ones, but I also really hate them. I think that there's something about the cheesiness, which is like you cringe, but you enjoy cringing. I think Sean Connery is probably the classiest, and I think the first ones I saw were probably Pierce Brosnan, so he has a slightly soft spot in my heart. But I'd probably plump for. No, I'm going to say Connery rather than Roger Moore.
Fair enough. It's kind of neat that most people do end up picking different ones for all kinds of reasons.
What about you, Trek? What you got
What do I have?
for Bond? Who's your top pick?
I don't know. I'm trying to give an honest answer. I would say if you were asked me who was my Bond, the first Bond I saw in the theaters, it would be Pierce Brosnan. Although he only had one good movie, the other three sucked.
I like Tomorrow Never Dies to some degree, but GoldenEye was fucking beast.
I can tolerate
Yeah.
the first three of his movies. Like they're definitely
Yeah, I even like parts of World of
declining
Warcraft.
quality as
They
go.
haven't aged well, except for, like you've got Goldeneye, and then the other three just pale in comparison.
Nobody likes Die Another Day. It's fine.
Pierce Brosnan has gone up in my estimation, definitely over the years.
Timothy Dalton was dark, although he only got 2 outings.
He wasn't.
Moonraker was a masterpiece. That's my sarcasm. I don't know. I think I'm going to have to go with Pierce Brosnan. And yes, you can all cancel me for that. Purely for nostalgia.
I mean, he's my favorite, so
we don't judge here. It's funny. Like I do have this weird soft spot for Roger Moore. I think it's just because he's so fucking affable and charming, like as an actor. Like,
he was like 58.
Yeah, it's like, and it's so ludicrous because like he was way too old, especially towards the ends. Like clearly it was like, I think the stuntmen probably should have got top billing rather than him. And you know, yeah, just a sort of man who was hurtling towards like his later years and still playing this like ass kicking spy. It was just so ludicrous. But yeah, he just always seemed to be having fun with it. It was an odd one.
Wasn't that part of the appeal as well? Like Bond is one of the few shows, or one of the few films that you can say which is, it's enjoyable by people of all ages, but it's kind of like the wish fulfillment fantasy of an older guy, I think. And that's kind of part of its appeal. It is slightly cheesy and outdated in its humor. Quite often the actors probably are a little bit too old for the roles that they're playing. But that's a very, very big demographic that's really kind of underserved by a lot of modern media. And maybe one of the reasons Daniel Craig doesn't come across as well is that Bond's lost that kind of slightly old-timey charm to it now. It's no longer... It's another one of those things which is trying to appeal to the modern audience, as Drinker, you were saying in your video earlier. And I like the idea that Bond exists as a property primarily for a group of people who are not fashionable and who have slightly quirky tastes that probably went out of date in the 1980s. But that's the appeal of it, no?
Well, that'd be my dad. Like my dad is he's in his mid-70s, but he's seen every James Bond in the theater going back to the first one. And his argument was he could identify with all of them up until Daniel Craig. He liked the movies, but he can't really connect with this one. And then he saw the last one, and he hasn't gotten over it yet. I did kind of warn him when he was going into it. I won't spoil it, but why? But yeah, it is James Bond. It is for an older generation. Like it's for my dad's generation. You know, you think your average James Bond fan, they're gonna be over 50 years. Well, actually, I'm getting pretty close to that myself. But yeah, it's the wish fulfillment of, I guess, for that generation, almost reliving their youth. I think that if I were running James Bond with the next reboot, I would have it take place in the 1960s and go back to where it started, make it a period piece.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it was Edgar Wright was talking about the Bond movies, and he raised a really interesting point about this, where he said that they tend to go like, he phrased it as like dark chocolate and milk chocolate, and so you had the Timothy Dalton, like really kind of serious, grounded, like dark and brooding. Then you had the Pierce Brosnan era, which was, a bit of a balance. It kind of skewed more towards the sort of Sean Connery, Roger Moore era of Bond, where it's like a little bit goofy, all those elements that you talked about, Little Platoon, where it's, the gentleman spy, and it's all very, there's an element of like unreality to it, clearly. Then you got the Daniel Craig era, where it was like just basically trying to be like Jason Bourne, like very super serious action and thriller, spy thriller, all that stuff, taking itself way too seriously. Now, perhaps we're due a more light-hearted Bond, a more like of a return to that. I don't want to say like farcical, but that slightly hyper real kind of era of Bond again.
It's the best and worst moment of any Bond film, in the sense that I cringed so hard it was pleasurable, is when Roger Moore he's in bed with the woman inevitably at the top of the Alps or wherever it is, and he says, "But James, I need you," and he says, "But so does England."
Yeah.
Skis down the slope, off the cliff, Union Jack parachute, and you just think that's Bond. It's so ridiculous, and I hate it, but I love it at the same time.
Yeah. The
And
Roger
then
Moore
to
era.
get developments on that, like for England, James is like, no, for me. That's
Yeah.
fucking, you get badass moments as well. Yeah, whatever I really truly loved and gained from Bond, I feel is gone at this point. Certainly didn't get it from No Time to Die.
It's so joyless now, isn't it?
Well, that's the difference between Daniel Craig and Pierce Brosnan. Where Pierce Brosnan, even though they're campy and cheesy as hell, the movies are fun. I find Daniel Craig's entire run, even though I do really like Casino Royale, it's just depressing as hell. You know, it kind of defeats the purpose of watching a James Bond movie. And it kind of, given the way they ended it, which again I won't spoil, but Jesus Christ, you know, it's not that adventure series anymore. It's a depressing action film series.
Yeah. And you kind of, that's, I guess, not why you would want to watch a Bond film. If you wanted just an action spy thriller, you would watch something like the Bourne trilogy. With Bond, you want the glamour, you want the exotic locations, you want the fast cars and the casinos and the tailor-made suits and all that stuff. It's all about giving it that element of just escapist fun,
Yeah.
And like Daniel Craig wasn't having fun, and so it's hard to have fun with his movies. Anyway, I think this guy's really got his money's worth out of us for that one. Kev Boss says, "Drinker, my favorite YouTuber. I think it's time for you and Mauler to have a happy hour for the OG Star Wars trilogy. It's always a joy to hear you talk about movies that you guys love. Cheers." I mean, yeah, we could, but like, what could we add to the discussion about OG Star Wars at this point?
That it's cool.
It's good, yeah.
That it was fun.
I think probably the most interesting one to talk about would probably be Return of the Jedi. I just think because like there's kind of more to pick apart there in terms of flaws and problems and high points and stuff.
Because what you're referring to, right, is like it would just be a stream of a lot of different topics that get brought up in passing in other streams. So it'd be like Luke's journey being a really strong hero's journey and something that's inspiring. It's like we've talked about it many times where it's like, well, now we actually talk about it from the perspective of the movie having happened. And Darth Vader being one of the most influential and incredible villains of all time. Why he's intimidating, why he makes the choices he does, how they turned him from, almost a one-note, one-dimensional evil guy to multi-dimensional, and how it made him endure forever. How Empire, being as good as it was, converted it from a successful IP to an infinitely successful franchise. Like A New Hope plus Empire made it, like, that's what they've been running on forever. Star Wars. As if the next set of Star Wars films will be like, well, you loved the sequels. No, check out this. Like, no, we're still remembering the OT. It's not the sequels. We're already fucking trying to forget that shit. Even though apparently they're trying to continue on. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, it could prompt some discussions. Yeah, maybe.
I think for sure. I had to bring this one up as well, just because it references Hot Fuzz. Timothy Dalton looks like he could have still done Bond when he was in Hot Fuzz for the age that he was in that movie. I fucking love Timothy Dalton in Hot Fuzz.
He's great.
Yeah. He's having so much fun. It's just a great character.
Just in general.
Just the fact that he runs a fucking local supermarket. He's this proper like Machiavellian villain. I think it's fantastic. G Unit says, "Have you seen Peter Jackson's World War I documentary masterpiece, They Shall Not Grow Old?" No, I was talking with Dank about this the other night, actually. He's seen it and he was blown away by it. Just how it really... Yeah, the scene he described to me was like a shot of this young guy who's just been recruited into the army, like posing for the cameras, which were obviously quite a rare thing in those days, sipping his cup of tea and like looking like all excited to be going off to war, and then it just it merges that into like the footage that they got of him when he was killed, and it's like torn apart by shell fire and stuff, and it's just like a perfect merge, and it's like that's the pretty much the embodiment of the meat grinder that these people were fed into, and it's just like that kind of thing is just peppered throughout the entire documentary. But yeah, it sounds fantastic. Not exactly a cheerful watch, but
definitely not. I have a slight complaint. I think Was that the one where because they were adapting Mortal Engines, and that was given to Weta, and he was slated to direct, and he left to pursue a passion project, and I think it was that one, which meant that Mortal Engines was handed over to the head VFX guy to direct essentially his first film, which turned Mortal Engines into a garbage fire. And talking of Star Wars and sort of the legacy that leaves, they have an "I am your father" moment in there as well, which is annoying because the book series is really lovely and charming. Now, it's a complaint in the sense that I wish Mortal Engines had been better, but I suppose if you are going to devote your attention to Mortal Engines or a faithful retelling of the tragedy of World War One, you would probably go with that. But it's still a complaint.
It is a shame that they overlapped like that. Like, they couldn't have been separated, and he could have given both his full attention because, yeah. I mean, I don't know what Mortal Engines could have been if it was really well handled. It seems like quite a goofy premise, but hey, I could be convinced, I suppose, if it was well done.
The film was so bad that it convinced me to read the books, and then I really enjoyed the books. It's a very, very, very quirky, fun, and heartfelt sort of steampunk, but quite cultured steampunk telling. Shame that, it could have been good, and it really wasn't.
Because, the movie just seemed to be all about the spectacle. Like, oh my god, London's chasing us. It's so dumb.
Hugo Weaving's in it.
I mean, I think there's more you could pull apart with that, like if it was better written, I suppose. Angry Batman says, Ellie's gay, what the fuck? I wish I'd thought to put that in my latest video when I was talking about video games. I could have dropped a bit in about Last of Us 2. Damn it. Missed it. Missed opportunities.
Isn't the TV adaptation's coming out in January, isn't it, I think?
I think so, yeah.
On the way.
Oh, goody.
Here comes another one.
I've played neither of them, so I've missed that entire drama, and I'm thinking I should probably play both before the series comes out.
I played the first one. It was awesome. I refuse to play the second one.
One was hideous is the word, I think.
Play the first one. You'll love it. Just avoid the second one. Pretend it never got made, and then you'll be fine. Mark Bernard says, my first super on the Drinker. Hope it gets read out as opposed to Friday Night Tights. I love your work, Drinker. I'm enjoying some grants whilst working. Well, that's my kind of job then. The world is going to hell, so bottoms up, gents. But well, I like that. I'll drink to that.
It's going to hell, so drink.
Yeah.
We're all going to die.
It's the best way to do it. Watch all your favorite entertainment and franchises and stuff just burn to the ground. Just sit down, have a drink, and watch it. Ant Rodriguez says, Hail Mueller and Drinker, what's your opinion on Dunkirk? I watched right after I watched 1917 and turned it off after 40 minutes. Interesting. So, I don't know, do you want to go first?
That's the problem. I don't have feelings about Dunkirk. I watched it and I was like, well, all I remember is that there's barely any characters in it that I could get attached to, that it was very well executed as a piece of filmmaking, but that I just didn't care about it.
It's a very technical Christopher Nolan movie.
Yeah, it fits right in with his what I expect from him these days, which is funny because Prestige is my favorite movie of all time, and it's by him, but it feels like an anomaly in his work as far as I'm concerned at this point. He's got a strange approach with characters when you look at a lot of his films. In
that he doesn't have any, and he
just
hires really good actors, basically. That seems to be his saving grace.
Yeah.
If you want to watch a good Dunkirk, is it 1951 or 53? The early 50s version of Dunkirk is one that actually does bring to life. I think it's sort of paradoxical. Christopher Nolan really wanted to bring to life the battle without the sort of the character motive to distract you from the grand picture, but in doing so, I think kind of missed the point of the whole thing. If you watch the 50s version manages to marry that sense of desperation. It portrays the realism of the conflict whilst also giving you people to care about, which is usually important in any kind of writing or filmic project. There's some sort of bleak gallows humor in it as well. There's a point where they're all cowering on the beach, and I think it was one of the first sort of World War II era films to sort of portray in non-propagandistic ways the psychology of the soldiers trapped. Previously, you'd get typical acts of sort of heroism trying to keep morale up and all of that. And Dunkirk gives you soldiers in the 1950s version, gives you soldiers in desperation sort of moaning and fearful and crying on the beach. And there's one of them who's saying, I don't want to die, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. And his commanding officer just pipes up with, well, he might bloody have to. And it's sort of like gallows humor, but it's an infinitely better film. Dunkirk, the Nolan version, it's loudness and it's designed to be a visual spectacle that's supposed to sort of leave its mark on you for its visuals. It's like you're getting a bird's eye view of the Battle of Dunkirk, but you're not invested in it. And it was kind of disappointing in that respect, because it is such a dramatic story. And to have there are other sort of attempts that he made, I think, to be a little bit propagandistic in a traditional sense, like a film style sense, which didn't really pan out. The choice of main characters being one of them. I think I wrote a review of that when I was at university. Actually, I'm trying to remember it, but it's the Nolan one was just a bit meh, but the 50s one is well worth watching.
Yeah, I've got a soft spot for these like 1950s war movies because there's a real earnestness to them. You know, they're trying to tell a really, good story that you can get invested in, and it's all, particularly the British ones, it's all very stiff upper lip and heroism and stuff. But there's a kind of I think there's an honesty to them as well that I quite like.
So there's a good chance some of the actors were actually in it, whereas you would
That's-
never mistake Harry Styles for someone who's been in a war recently.
Yeah. Did you ever watch The Longest Day? I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
Yeah. Appropriate, given it's one of the longest films in existence, but it's a brilliant film as well.
Yeah, same deal. I think quite a few of the people that were in that took part in a lot of these actual raids in on D-Day, and that's pretty incredible to be able to see that on screen. And the scale of it is fantastic, and they actually get you invested in quite a few of the characters there as well. Like you've got guys like Richard Burton in it, Sean Connery's in it, like
Sean
really
Connery,
early
John
role for
Wayne, I
him.
think, is in it as well.
John Wayne, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really, really staggering array of talent. But it's that sort of lived experience aspect that actors they used to be able to bring to their roles, which we've completely lost now. I mean, can you name any actor currently working who has even half the life experience in terms of traumatic events, in terms of involvement in world wars, as you would have got in The Longest Day? I think that's part of the reason that so many writers and actors just fail to portray convincing and varied roles now, is that they just don't have that life experience that we used to have in the 50s and 60s, when the actors would have been involved on the front lines of a war. It's hard. You don't want a war to recapture the acting talent, obviously, but I think we have lost something for that.
Let's start a war so we can get better movie.
Yeah. I agree, though. That's the problem. Like when you're dealing with people, like the biggest hardship they've encountered is that someone got their Starbucks order wrong or something. Like that's it's not quite the same realm,
Or they work at Starbucks.
Yeah, I have to work 8 hours a day. It's too much. Sophie says, "Hi, greetings from Peru. Happy to see all of you. I've been watching the live streams for Geeks and Gamers and Nerdrotic. Definitely want to go to Europe one day if it happens. Well, best of luck to you, and I hope you enjoy it." Georgiev says, "Hello, guys. Drinker, can you please make a separate episode for the Wheel of Time disaster? I will buy you a bottle of Glenlivet. I hate the show, and I need some of your rants. Please, man, I beg you." I just... Every person I've spoken to about Wheel of Time says it's garbage, and I just don't want to subject myself to that. Going into it knowing it's going to be
season
bad.
3 already, isn't it? Soon.
I thought it was 2.
Well, what I mean is the third one's on its way, right? Or is it the second one?
They've
I
done
thought it was
one
the second
season. Season 2's on its way. I don't know if they've
okay.
confirmed for season 3, but I think the plan, Disbrew was saying, is going to season. Is it 5 seasons? So it's another one of those ones that's so bad it's compelled me to look the books up, which I haven't done yet. But that is not a good show. It's a trial run, I think, for Rings of Power, and it fails in many of the same ways.
Darth Goldust says, "Best Doctor Who actor."
Ooh, that's tough. I imagine the runnings will include Tom Baker, David Tennant, Christopher Eccleston, Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi. That's probably going to be the selection.
I always like Peter Davidson.
Throw him in as well, yeah.
Yeah. Probably let Boltrack take this one, actually. He's quite a Doctor Who aficionado.
Most original actor, the best in some respects, Matt Smith. Best actor, probably overall, Peter Capaldi. Best classic Doctor, you could say Tom Baker, but he really was playing himself.
Yeah.
Peter Davison actually, if you listen to the audio dramas, which I stopped listening to those a couple years ago too, but he actually starts, as he gets older, he plays the Fifth Doctor completely differently. It becomes a darker character. He does it with a lower voice. So he had more range as he got older, but I would say, I'm going to say it's a tie between 11 and 12. So for people who don't know the numbers, that's Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi. Capaldi's the only one I've actually met in person. Great guy, actually. But Matt Smith is... I don't think I've ever seen an actor like him. His mannerism, he's almost like an alien himself. He doesn't look or sound or act or move like anybody I've ever seen on screen. So yeah, I'm gonna give this one a tie.
I think he's pretty commanding when he plays Damon.
Yeah.
House of the Dragon. Like you just, yeah, like you can't really take your eyes off him, really, can you? Like you're always waiting for him to do the next crazy thing.
Capaldi can do that, and I was Capaldi was a real shame. He's like the ideal Doctor if he had been doing this, 20 years ago. He's a brilliant actor. I couldn't get into him though because I'm a massive fan of the thick of it, and every time I see Peter Capaldi, I want him to be swearing at people, and I couldn't see him as the Doctor without him calling the Dalek all names under the sun. So yeah.
Yeah, I was. He was the only actor that I was really familiar with before he was cast, because I love the thick of it too. I've got it on DVD. I've watched the whole series more times than I can count. So when he was cast, I'm like, I think his age, myself, which he was 55 when he took on the role, I think he was the perfect age coming after several younger actors. The problem was they did one good season where they gave us the Dark Doctor, a temperamental Doctor that went back to William Hartnell. And then he's playing a completely different character in his second season, which kind of sucks. And he's not coming back to the show. They have another actor playing the 12th Doctor on the audiobooks, and Matt Smith is not coming back to the show either. So I don't think either of them are. I know Peter Capaldi, even though he won't say it publicly, he's bitter towards the way he was handled, and I think Matt Smith just wants to distance himself from it.
Didn't Capaldi say he really grew up and as a massive fan of Doctor Who? Didn't he say he write into the
Oh yeah, no, he and there's him, Colin Baker, and David Tennant are the only the only actors that were actually Doctor Who fans. But no, Peter Capaldi, that was his life's dream. He was a super fan. He's like I used to be. And his dream was to play the Doctor, and he wanted to play it like the first 4 Doctors, which he got one season sort of. But no, that was his life's dream, which it really sucks the way they treated him, the way he was basically forced out, even though he would never admit it. We all know he was forced out so they could do what they did. But yeah, no, I think I think for 1 year he was perfect. The stories were bad, the agenda was coming in, but his performance was spot on.
Reaper51 says, "Greetings, Drunkler and guests. Drinker, I stumbled onto your channel while looking for a review from Angry Joe and gave you a chance. I'm glad I did. I dig deeper into the Drinker verse every day and find more lore. Keep up the great work. I'll get your channel soon." And that's for $100, so thank you very much, man. And yeah, there's a whole world of lore out there in the Drinker verse. I'm glad I got someone's given it a name now. Awesome. Torsten says, "Drinker, you roguish raconteur, did you let the doggos watch Rings of Power again? They looked rough." Yeah, that was a picture I put up on Twitter. Yeah, it was just carnage in the dog area. They were rolling about all over the place. And yeah, that's what Rings of Power does to people. And as for this Frosk guy, he seems a little unhinged. Well, you're not wrong. Big Rog, give you a thumbs up. Thank you. Mithridate says, "No idea how Marvel mustered the balls to profit from Chadwick Boseman's death. They killed T'Challa off screen as opposed to recasting in order to create a hollow tragedy, the ultimate disservice." I suppose that's always the question, isn't it? How do you handle the death of an actor? Do you just recast them and pretend like nothing's happened, or?
Well, like they're doing with Ross.
Yeah. Which they're bringing Harrison Ford in for that, which is interesting.
Yeah, I'll have to see how that goes.
Can't wait for him to not give a shit about it. But
So we already know how that's going to go. He will play a grumpy, cynical, tired old man.
yeah.
Because that's his range.
But would it have been more or less respectful to just swap someone else out and just have T'Challa continue? I don't. Yeah, I can't see that working either. So it was a tough situation to be in, I suppose. CJ says, "Hail to Geeks and Gamers. These guys are non-stop." Yeah, it seems like they had a busy time of it, but it's good that we got them for an hour or so. Cody Griffin says, "Henry knows it's garbage, and so he left The Witcher. Frosk who? And no one cares about Wakanda. Cheers all. Still waiting for Army of Darkness. Recommends Drinker." I think I need to get on that, don't I? I was going to do it in
Every
for
time I
Halloween,
get like
but-
PTSD every time they say Army of. I'm like, it's not the dead, right? Please don't say.
Yeah, no. Never going to do a Drinker recommends for that, trust me. MP says, "Can Russell T Davis and David Tennant save River Song?" I don't know. I don't even know what's happened to River Song now. I'm so disconnected from Doctor Who. Is she dead?
Last I heard, she was on Big Finish, and she does a lot of lecturing.
Okay. Probably not then. Double Brewski says, "I haven't seen an organization exploit the death of a black man this hard since BLM." Oof. And my stream just got demonetized. Names Ryan 50 years ago says, "Drinker, the Predator didn't see Arnold because he's body editor LT as covered in mud." What? No, that's all I got there. I'm just reading it out verbatim. Patty P says, "Hail Drinker and panel. Recently watched your Predator Happy Hour. Is there any way to save the series? And if so, what movie would you make?" So I guess this is kind of for all of us. Can you say Predator at this point? Some people might argue that Prey did. I would not be one of those people. But
Sorry, what exactly is the question?
is it possible to save the Predator series? Like, could you redeem it somehow? And if so, how would you do it? Like, what movie would you make personally that would fix things?
Yeah, Prey definitely hasn't done it. It would. I think the thing we always talk about, right? Just return to basics, flip the environment and the era every time. More than happy to go super far into the future in a different planet, but also super far into humanity's past and tell a story where the Predator wins, for fuck's sake. I'm
Yeah,
bored
why
of it
not?
always losing, especially in really cringe ways at the end, where someone just like, "Oh, look, a grenade vomited up by a dog." Like, what?
Or because
does
of
that
Prey, it shoots itself in the head, which is just. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think it's one of those that should not have a franchise. There are certain things that shouldn't. I don't know that. Yeah, sure. You could find the formula that gives you a Predator film that's decent enough to watch, but I'm struggling to think of one that doesn't just play off of the same kind of themes and motifs as the first one did. And if that's the case, does it really need to have more? I mean, you can do interesting things, I suppose, with the premise. But Prey did that. Prey dropped it into a new time, a new era, and for the first half, at least, sort of explored that somewhat. But I kind of think that that's sort of done now. I don't really see another way of doing a decent Predator film that's not just, well, it's the closer to the original Predator, the better. And then what's the point? You've already done it once. I just think maybe Predator is one of those that you should leave at this point. It was brilliant, and there was some good stuff spawned from it, apparently. And that's it. Don't carry it on, because you're only going to make it worse.
I kind of agree that like it doesn't really support an ongoing franchise because, like you say, the interest and the intrigue of the first Predator movie was in not knowing what they were up against, and once you know, like, well, okay, it's not interesting anymore. You're just putting the Predator into a bunch of different situations and having kill people in more gory ways. There's only so many times you can do that before it's just played out. Same with Terminator, actually, as people were
Like,
Yeah,
we
I
saying.
was
like the
about to
Predator
say
2
that.
exists, though, right?
What's that?
We like the Predator 2 exists, right? We prefer it exists than
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
No, I like Predator too.
It's not, obviously doesn't reach the same level as the first one, but I certainly don't mind it. It's I think it's a fun movie, and
I was actually about to
I
agree
enjoy
with you that Terminator's kind of the same thing. Like, you watch one and be like, this is one and done, surely. But the funny thing is, like, Terminator 2 is I think, one of the best movies of all time. So it's just like,
I think with
what's
things
going
like
on here?
this,
Is it just
you
if it's
can-
good,
you can maybe get away with doing this once, where it's like we're kind of just rehashing the ideas of the first one, but we're going to do it slicker and bigger budget, all that sort of thing, which is kind of what you'd get with T2. But then you're kind of done because you can't copy a copy, and that's essentially what you got with Terminator 3, and then basically ever since then it's been doing that.
I think Alien might be. Alien is the cliche comparator, but it's a useful one because they and Jaws as well, in the sense they both play off of the unseen and the fear of the unknown and the unseen. All three of them, in fact, play off the unknown and the unseen. The Predator you don't see for the vast majority of it until the end, really. Alien is a psychological horror more than it is a straight horror. And Jaws, you don't see the shark for the first, is it 40 minutes of the film? You don't see or get any glimpse of it at all. And that fear of the unknown works once. It doesn't very easily work a second time. Aliens accomplished the switch by a genre change to an action film where, well, we've kind of accepted that people know that what the alien is. You can still exploit the jump scare and you can exploit the absence, but you can't do the same psychological horror techniques as you did in the first one. But after that first genre change, when it goes from psych horror to action, it didn't really improve after that. The only other genre change it's not even really a genre change, but Aliens versus Predator tried to change the mood a little bit, I think. With Predator, I think you got already the same sort of... I mean, Predator 2 is more actiony than the first Predator is, in the sense that you see the Predator more and there's more direct engagement. And once you've done that, it's hard to see where you go without just copying either the first or the second one. Once you've reached that point, as I said before, I don't know that it's really worth continuing. You can switch genres once quite easily. Twice is a difficult thing to do.
It does make me wonder, like, could you somehow do, like, some crazy, like, psychological drama with a predator involved? Like, just go completely off in, like, a weird tangent. Because, you know, it kind of feels like, you know, starting off with the Aliens, you know, movies, you're starting off with a horror, a slasher in space, essentially. Then you move down to action. It's not a degradation, but it's like you're going to a more simplistic kind of style of movie making. It's still fantastic, but you know, that's where you're going. With Predator, you're already starting off with an action film, so you can't go any further down with that. And so, is it possible in theory to do something completely different with a Predator involved in it? I mean, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that would make that work, but I don't know. It'd be an interesting thing to consider, I suppose. Because, like we've said, with the Predator movies, you're essentially just doing more action movies. With the Predator, which you now know about, it's not interesting or mysterious now. It's just a thing that people have to fight, and we know what it can do. Prey was only mildly interesting in the sense that it was a different group of humans that it was up against with different abilities. But that's all you got, really. It's just a predator. You know what it is. You know what it can do. Same deal.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'll pick it up on physical media from the bargain bin. I'll watch it. I watched the last one. I watched the last two. I'm not expecting much.
Don't. Yeah. And then you'll be all right. Benjamin Flensborg says, "Evening, boys. Seems if you invite hell, it shows up. By the way, we'd love to see a sledgehammer going through that drywall, Ryan and Jeremy." I wanted to see that, yeah. It would have been weird from our point of view because they could have punched through and we would have seen each other's, you know, footage mirrored on the stream, but never mind. Smooth the DJ says, "People will forget the movie as quick as the last Marvel product. The general consensus will be Wakanda, whatever. Also, the Lego sets leaked that Shuri is Black Panther 2 to 3 months ago. This is the problem when you got all these tie-ins and, you know, other companies making stuff like merch and things based off your movie. They know what the plot of the film's going to be because they have to, and then it ends up leaking that way."
I'm pretty sure was it Lego Star Wars or is it like official Star Wars game for Revenge of the Sith? I'm pretty sure one of them came out before the movie did, and it pretty much had the whole plot line in it.
That was Revenge of the Sith, I remember. Yeah.
It's just like,
Lego.
wow.
Got a lot to answer for.
Well, yeah, like it wasn't a mistake or anything. It was just like, yeah, there you go, enjoy. It's like, oh.
I'll do a couple more and then I'll finish up. Jedi Brooks says, "Why did Killmonger kill his girlfriend?"
Because the movie sucks. Why the fuck did they kill Claw? That was such a huge mistake. It's Andy
a cool
fucking
character.
Serkis.
Andy Serkis was swinging for the fences with that performance. Like,
you had
threw
no
everything in
idea.
there.
He didn't know, and they didn't know what the fuck Claw was. They were like, I don't know. He's a character. Do stuff with him. Make him laugh. What a fucking... I hate that, dude. One of the things I wanted them to do with Taskmaster before, like, this isn't even knowing anything from the comics, so I know that people might find this annoying, but Claw could have filled this role as well. Having some kind of subordinate type character. Any of you guys ever watch Alias?
Yep.
There was a character called Sark, and he would keep turning up as a subordinate for other main villains because he was like a mercenary for hire, and so he'd have a rapport with the main heroes and that they wouldn't necessarily want to kill him if they had the chance to, because it would feel like, say they defeat him and he's captured, and it's like they wouldn't execute him because of the whole morals of heroes and stuff. But imagine that kind of character in Marvel where, you know, Claw helps out Obadiah Stane, and you know, in Iron Man 1 vaguely in the background, maybe we hear about him, and then by the time we hit, I don't know, Iron Man 3, he's paid a lot by that Aldrich Killian, that was his name, right? And, you know, you get a little mini boss fight between him and Rhodey or something, and then he gets away. Then he comes back in Age of Ultron in the same role that he had. And then, you know, he just keeps on going, keeps popping back up just as a sort of unifying element. And then maybe at one point, Thanos turns up and they actually need Claw and his connections to get access to particular weaponry, and he has to team up with them temporarily or something. Then he comes back and he... You know, by the time we're in post-Endgame era, we get different people offering him more money to do jobs that involve things that are really fucked up, and then he becomes an enemy again. Like, a whole through line, played by an actor who's really good. Why not? Like, they never take advantage of this shit. Instead, they're just like, he died. Why? I don't know, Killmonger killed him. Why? Well, that gives him access to Wakanda? Question mark?
Yeah.
They're like, okay.
That's all we got.
You wanted a favor with the guy from Get Out, whose dad was killed by Killmonger or some Claw. I can't entirely remember. I just remember being a fucking waste.
None of it makes any sense. I'll make this the last one here. George the Giant Slayer for $100 says Wakanda Forever, another film from the perspective of an estrogen-deprived woman looking for a hormone high by gaslighting the audience, except that it's written by two men. All hail Drinker, Mauler, Jeremy, Ryan, Media, and Platoon. Thank you very much, and thank you for your generous donation, man. I think that's probably a good point to finish it up, actually, because we've been doing this for about 3 hours now, so I think that's probably enough for one evening. I just want to say, well, thank you for everyone that's given all these amazing donations. Thank you for being part of chat. It's been awesome for you guys and for us to try and entertain you a little bit. Very much appreciate it, and I really appreciate all the donations for the Kickstarter, man. Like, it's crazy numbers it's at now. We're currently deep in the midst of script rewrites for that to try and expand it a little bit and make use of all this, so that is going well. I'll turn it over to my panel and just ask you guys, is there anything you want to make people aware of that you got coming up that we can plug right here, right now?
Nope.
Okay, easy then. Well, that's simple. Mauler, your plushie should be arriving with me fairly soon because I ordered it. So.
I got an email today that said that they'd apparently made a mistake with telling me it was going to be ready this month and that it's actually ready next month.
What?
So you might be getting that email too. I don't know if it's a huge mistake they put out for the Muller and Fringy ones, but now it says it's going to be ready at December 10th. So.
God damn it.
I know, outrageous.
I better get it for Christmas, that's all I'm saying.
They're floofing them up, okay? They're going to be better than ever. That's the idea.
One would hope. Also, Platoon and Chris, thank you guys for coming on tonight. It's been great to have both of you.
Awesome,
again.
man. It's been forever, and nothing exploded. Knock on wood.
Yay! Yeah. The setup's slightly better now, so it's generally okay.
If I can, I'm gonna, because just this has been my life for basically a month. I will plug. I'm still doing Rings of Power, and I'm hoping every time I set a deadline, it falls back. Rings of Power Part 2, the critique, is supposed to be out this Sunday, which means it will probably be next Sunday. But if you're still interested in deep dives, as in 2.5 hours for episode 3 deep dives, only
yes.
5 more to go, then yeah, maybe this Sunday. But otherwise, I will be doing Wakanda Forever when that comes out. I wasn't online when the first Black Panther came out, so I've missed that opportunity to be called a racist.
You better be careful there, buddy.
There's always new opportunities to be called
I've got that to
racist
look forward
these
to,
days.
definitely. And then there's a Smurf movie coming out in December, so I'll be reviewing that as well. But Rings of Power is the next one.
Olivia, like, don't you worry, guys. I'll take care of that Smurf movie. Good stuff.
No, that's awesome, and looking forward to seeing that when it comes out. Your review, not the actual Smurf movie. Well, I guess that's it then. That is all we've got for today, and we'll catch up on Super Chats over the weekend. But for now, that's all we got. So go away now.
Bye.